Hey everyone, it's Aldo Gandia, and if you're wondering why I did not play the usual open to the show, and that's because Dan Aguirre can't make it tonight. Oh, I'm so sad because I was really looking forward to him having a discussion with our guest who they're both kind of cut out of the same cloth and that they have great recall on games from the past, and so I was really looking forward to that. But many of you know that Dan works a couple of jobs, and his one of his jobs called and said, "Hey, we need you to come in," and so that's where he is tonight. But nonetheless, we've got a great show planned for you today. About 45 minutes in, we're going to have Vinny Parisi from Bar Down, the new Blackhawks podcast that debuts this Wednesday. And right now, we have with us Brett Maly. Brett Maly, how are you, my friend?
I'm good, Aldo. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Brett, tell people what you do for a living, and then after that, we'll talk a little sports.
All right, I sure will. Yeah, I'm an art appraiser, full-time, Bears fan, full-time as well, but I make my living, doing appraisal work, all manner of fine art, mostly 19th and 20th century masters. We have a family gallery here called Art Encounter. It's been here since 92, so coming up on 30 years, and have just really been blessed. Had a great time building the business with my father, who's still involved, and I've been involved in all manner of different things, everything from Pawn Stars. I was the expert on that show for about eight years, and then I've been involved in a Leonardo da Vinci sculpture. I've been involved in some tennis things that we're going to get to, I think, a little bit later. So yeah, it's been a fun life out here in Sin City, dealing with the beauty of the city and the beauty of the art.
Great. Well, we're going to talk more about Pawn Stars and about some of your work in the art field and the Nadal painting. We got a video to share with our audience. We'll do that in about 30 minutes or so. But let's talk Chicago Bears. I want to get your.
Do we have to?
And Brett used to write articles for the website when it was up years ago, and he did such an incredible job of recalling some really sad moments in Bears history, but also you did a great job of calling some of your favorite Chicago Bears and so forth. But let's start first with the current state of the Chicago Bears. Where's your level of confidence that Ryan Pace can finish off this offseason and field a competitive team in 2021?
It's what's frustrating about the Bears right now is just that, in Bears seasons past, going into a season where we've been frustrated with, like, for example, John Fox, his last year, you could direct your hatred towards something. You could direct your hatred towards John Fox. He was just, at that point, I just wanted him out of here. He was, cashing a paycheck, and he was so cantankerous. This regime, though, I'm not able to generate that level of hatred. I mean, there are things that I really like about Coach Nagy. There are things that I like about Ryan Pace outside of the quarterback, talent analysis. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things I have trouble. It's a little frustrating because, I can't really direct my passion at something. And I think, that unfortunately, I think the problem with the Bears goes even higher up the food chain than Nagy and Ryan Pace. And until something happens with ownership, I don't think it's going to really matter who we've got at the helm as far as GM and coach. So that's frustrating. And I was really bummed to see Kyle Fuller go. That was really disappointing too, because he was a homegrown talent. He was somebody we drafted, first rounder. And he's the kind of guy you want to see remain with the team long term. He got over some initial hurdles, Vic Fangio picking on him a little bit, but he rose to the occasion, and he became a real asset to the team player, a valuable member of the team, both on and off the field. So you want to see that rewarded. I mean, it's not like he was a free agent and he totally overvalued himself in the market and we were forced to let him go. Right. We signed him to the contract. Right. And now he's not here. So what kind of precedent does that set? That's
right.
So I'm just kind of in a little bit of a malaise, I guess. I don't want to get too passionate about what happens, in March, because we don't see the big picture. We don't know what dealings are going on, behind the scenes, and there's a lot more to go to fill out the roster. But again, to this point, I would imagine you probably are feeling the same, just a little numb, and especially after all the hoopla of the buzz with possibly Deshaun Watson, and that. So
yeah, that's I was reading the Sports Illustrated article today where another accuser, this is a woman, a therapist who has not filed a lawsuit, is considering doing so. But she relayed to Jenny Varantis of SI.com her encounter with Deshaun Watson. And it was, pretty chilling, his behavior, his alleged behavior in that incident. And so there's now a total of, I think, 19 pending lawsuits and perhaps more to come. So hopefully that'll work out in a favorable way for all parties considered and let justice run its course.
I have a question for you on that, Aldo, real quick, if you don't mind. Now, I mean, we give Ryan Pace a lot of shtick for, passing up on Watson and Mahomes, of course. But Mahomes, I think in most people's drafts boards, he was, further down in the first round. Watson was kind of the glaring omission. Do you think, and again, this is all hypothetical because nothing's been proven or disproven, but do you think maybe there was some scuttlebutt behind the scenes coming up on the draft? I mean, it's not like, if assuming, this did happen, it's probably not something that just happened overnight once he became a pro.
Right.
Well,
all accounts about Deshaun Watson's character when he was at Clemson is that he was an outstanding individual. There weren't any red flags there. And Greg Gabriel, the scout who has done a show here at the Barroom Network, he was for 11 years, he was associated with the Chicago Bears, the director of college scouting for a number of years. He didn't scout Deshaun Watson because he left after that, but from his sources, he didn't hear anything untoward about Deshaun Watson. He heard that he was just a good leader, played in big games and so forth. My feeling on this is that this could be a situation, again, if this is true, that this could be a situation where, he's a very wealthy man and he seems to have allegedly a fetish of having massage therapists take care of him. So again, these are all allegations made by multiple people, and the story at SI.com, Jenny Varantis is a very good reporter, and she's double checked the story that the person who is making these allegations against Deshaun Watson checked phone records and so forth, and Instagram messages and so forth, and it seems to pan out at least her part of the story. So it is very disturbing. And I got to tell you, there is a reason why Ryan Pace did not take Deshaun Watson out to dinner. He took Patrick Mahomes out to dinner, and he took Mitch Trubisky out to dinner. They scouted all the top quarterbacks from that draft, but for some reason he didn't take Deshaun Watson out to dinner. Maybe he did hear something. I don't know. We can only speculate, right?
Well, Pace has always been like Mr. High character guy, sometimes to the detriment of the talent on the team. Yes. So, I mean, if you heard a rumor or, there was a little scuttlebutt going around, who knows? And that's why it's tough to do this type of analysis, because we're only getting a small fraction of the story.
Absolutely. And Ron is absolutely right. The accusations need to be investigated. Right. He's definitely innocent until proven guilty. And so we will do that. Camp High wants to know, are you the art guy from Pawn Stars?
I'm the art guy. Yes, I'm the art expert from Pawn Stars, for sure. And relating that to Deshaun Watson, you get these young guys a lot of money at a young age, and sometimes bad things happen. I think Chum Lee, my book, probably attest to that. So he ran into some legal issues, and now he's matured and he's able to deal with those a little bit better. But, you're right. I mean, a lot of money, a lot of fame, a lot of idle time in the off season that sometimes results in some trouble. But again, I don't want to condemn him, on speculation right now.
Absolutely. All right. So we've already got some challenges to your opinion regarding Ryan Pace. The factor says that Pace took Trubisky number one and paid Mike Glennon. He's not a good quarterback scout.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that you said that, but
No. And that's what I said. I said, accepting his quarterback analysis, really, you could make a case that he's been a pretty darn fine GM at a lot of the other positions. We've got say what you will, we've got a pretty talented roster. On defense, even on offense. Offensive line is a little iffy, but receiver spot, he's finding gems in Mooney in the late rounds. He finally, I think, got the tight end position right. But you can't overlook the quarterback. I mean, that's the elephant in the room, and he's bungled that a number of times. And it's a shame because I think that'll ultimately be his undoing. But I think he has cultivated a pretty talented and deep roster.
Right. Well, I will challenge you on a few things regarding Pace, and that is, aside from Roquan Smith, he's missed on all of his first-round draft picks. Now, you can't really say that he missed on Leonard Floyd, but he did miss on Leonard Floyd in terms of not extending his contract or not offering the fifth-year option and allowing Leonard Floyd to leave the team and instead signing a veteran Robert Quinn, who is not familiar with the 3-4 defense, although everyone will tell you he plays a lot of the Bears play a lot of 4-down linemen and so forth. But what I saw over and over again was Robert Quinn dropping into coverage and the sophisticated 3-4 defense concepts.
Right.
So he's not the athlete that he used to be, and it just seemed like a bad fit. While Leonard Floyd can run all over the field, he can guard some wide receivers and so forth. And then when we talk about high character guys, he's made some mistakes in that area too. I mean, remember Jeremiah Ratliff? I was reminded of this because I saw a story about it just recently. This guy ended up being a very dangerous person, and they had to call the police at Hallis Hall to have him removed and stuff. And then there was the guy from the San Francisco 49ers. I'm drawing a blank on his name, who had some allegations of misconduct and so forth. So there hasn't been, you want your general manager to hit over 500 in his personnel decisions. And I'm not sure he's at that level. I mean, it's a tough job. It's tough to evaluate talent and to project whether they can play in the NFL. And you've got to do your homework in terms of checking on character and so forth. But boy, he's missed probably, I don't know for sure if this is accurate, but maybe more than he's hit.
Yeah, and you may be right there, but I mean, guys like Leonard Floyd, they've proven that they can play. Robert Quinn was playing well before he got here, so you kind of wonder if that's an error of judgment by Pace or if that's just an error of the coaching staff not putting him in the right position to succeed, because Floyd's doing quite well with the Rams, and we could really find that right niche for him. And and as far as the character thing, I mean, I cut Pace a little bit of slack taking second chances on some guys. These weren't guys that he drafted with high picks. These are guys that he brought in like Ratliff and is kind of reclamation projects, and those are guys that you might take a shot at, but those didn't pan out either. I mean, I guess maybe, as a Bears fan, I grew up and, I was going to college in the middle to late 90s. And, some of the talent decisions we were making back then, where we were drafting we were trading for guys like Rick Meyer and drafting guys like John Allred. And so just seeing some gems in the fourth, fifth, sixth round being picked is enough for me to soften my stance. Plus, I got to say, Ryan Pace went to my high school. So I got a soft spot for him. Yeah, believe it or not, he went to my high school. I graduated the year he was a freshman. Marcus High School in Flower Mound, Texas.
I'm sorry, where is it at again?
Flower Mound, Texas. A little place called Marcus High School in Flower Mound, Texas. A suburb of Dallas, but off north, kind of, a little adjacent to a larger city called Louisville. But Flower Mound, Texas, they actually had a big giant flower mound right in the middle of the city. And that was kind of their claim to fame. I think the Pilgrim camped on it one time or something. I don't remember, but
How about that? And so
so
was he ahead of you or behind you in
he
school?
was behind me. No, the year I graduated was the year he came in as a freshman. So I didn't know him. I can't,
Sure.
we didn't run in the same circles, but
Mm-hmm.
I can say from my time at Marcus, I mean, right there, in the Dallas Fort Worth area, football was king, and there were a lot of real good football minds, good, coaches, players, and everything. So he's well heeled from that standpoint, and candidate for the Bears. And they said, oh yeah, he's a graduate from a little school called Marcus High School in Flower Mound, Texas. I'm like, huh? Hey, wait a second, So surprisingly, there's a lot of fairly Rod Smart, the basketball player, came from Marcus High School right around the same time as I did. So tiny school, but actually some decent pedigree as far as athletes and art appraisers.
There you go. All right. I want to get your thoughts on Andy Dalton. Obviously, everyone is disappointed that this whole Russell Wilson thing didn't work out, and there's still some hope that perhaps during draft time maybe a deal can be worked out. But it does appear, at least according to the social media department by the Chicago Bears, that Andy Dalton is the QB1, as you declared to via Twitter. What are your thoughts on Dalton? Do you think he's got anything left in the gas? Do you think that he can lead this team to the playoffs like he did with Cincinnati Bengals? Or do you think that this is just maybe a Mike Glennon situation where they're just bringing him in for a year and they're going to draft a quarterback and Dalton will only be here for 17 games, which is now apparently what we will be playing this upcoming season?
I really feel kind of bad for Dalton. I mean, he's a little bit in a no-win situation. That they've already, because of all the fervor about Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson, they built up expectations for Bears fans and the Chicago community sky high, possibly getting those guys in. So when that went by the by, and then you have to bring in a guy like Dalton, you're going to have that exhale moment where it's like, like that. But right. I mean, I think Dalton's he's a fine quarterback. He's coming into a regime that's potentially on its last leg. They're desperate. The Bears fans are already against him, which they shouldn't be. But I'm seeing stuff. People putting up. What was that restaurant that said our ginger beer is better than our ginger quarterback? There was a. They're putting it up on the marquee, and so they're already making him feel real welcome before he's even put on the uniform. So I think he's a hard guy to get excited about, because he's obviously on the back end of his career. But I mean, as a fantasy football guy who used to own AJ Green years ago, I mean, the guy can throw it. The guy can play. The guy's a gamer. So I think with our team, I think he's got a shot at some success. But again, I think he's in a little bit of a no-win situation, which is unfortunate. And the other thing I'll say is the one thing I said was, and I said it on a tweet, I said sometimes the best move you make is the one you don't make. And now that I'm reading with all these, cap casualties and all of that, these quarterbacks like, Jimmy G potentially being available, guys like Marcus Mariota potentially becoming available for about half the price of what we're paying, Carson, I'm sorry, Andy Dalton. I almost said Carson Palmer, another Cincinnati quarterback. But, you kind of have to wonder if maybe the Bears didn't go, oh, crap, we got to get somebody quick, where if they would have waited a little bit longer, bided their time, they might have been in a position. Yeah.
I think that there was a certain panic that set in when the Russell Wilson trade talks that apparently took place in North Dakota during Trey Lance's pro day. John Schneider of the Seahawks and Ryan Pace tried to work out a deal there. It didn't happen. And I think when Ryan Pace came back, Andy Dalton's agent probably said, hey, we're getting other offers, guys. And so what's going on? And so Pace didn't want to go into the draft with the possibility that there might not be a veteran quarterback available, that you would have a Nick Foles and then potentially a mid-round draft pick as your backup quarterback because you can't trade up into the first round, or the possibility of trading up into the first round and higher into the first round to grab one of those top 5 quarterbacks is such a daunting task.
Right.
So, I'm with you there. I think that there was a sense of panic. Hey, we better bring in Andy Dalton, and then, at least we're covered that way. And I got to believe that because of that, Nick Foles is probably expendable. Not sure if anyone wants him. At the very least, if they bring in a young quarterback and they are able to trade for one of those top quarterbacks, then I got to believe that Nick Foles will either be traded or released. So that way they don't have a 3 quarterback room and Foles finds himself as number 3. And why draft one of those top 5 quarterbacks if that quarterback is going to be number 3? You want him to learn as much.
Right. Now, what do you think? What do you think their odds are of being able to move up in the draft? Because that's pretty much that's their option right now. I'm the more I read about guys like Mac Jones, it used to be a few weeks ago they were saying he was an option potentially at 20. Now I'm hearing him going at number 8.
Exactly. And so I've got let me call up the draft order here. I've got it nearby. Let's call that up, and then let's take a look. So we know Jacksonville is going to take Trevor Lawrence. Mm-hmm. We know that the Jets have Sam Darnold at quarterback, but there's just lots of talk that they're falling in love with Zach Wilson, who had this tremendous pro day. He's throwing all these kind of Patrick Mahomes passes off platform and stuff. And somebody in the chat said that there's now a story about Mac Jones maybe moving up to the number 2 position. So I think it's very, very likely that there's going to be 3 quarterbacks chosen with those first 3 picks. And then San Francisco, of course, making that trade with Houston. So the first available spot is that number 4, that Atlanta Falcons, because even though they have a veteran in Matt Ryan, there's just talk that they wouldn't mind trading back and acquiring more draft capital and then acquiring a quarterback in later rounds, so that there's that slight possibility. And then with Cincinnati at number 5, we know they have Joe Burrow. So those are the spots that Ryan Pace has to be targeting, and in order to ensure you're going to get one of the top 5 quarterbacks, because with everybody moving the way they are, it is quite possible that all 5 of those top quarterbacks could be taken in the first 5 picks.
What do you think it would cost to get up to where Atlanta is?
Goodness. I think it's definitely judging by the Patrick Mahomes trade, that was 2 first-round draft picks in a third rounder. I think that it's going to cost more because the market is much more competitive back then. Like you said earlier, the buzz on Patrick Mahomes wasn't as big as it is with these 5 quarterbacks, and even Mac Jones, who wasn't even thought of as a first rounder in the middle of the college football season, has worked his way into the first round and into talk as a top 10 pick. So I think it could be 2 first round picks and probably 2 second round picks. Do you think, play general manager here, Brett, if that's what Atlanta is asking for, do you pull the trigger?
I think they will pull the trigger. I think they will do it. I don't know. I mean, it's so tough. It's so tough. I mean, I hate giving up that draft capital. I really do on a real maybe, because it's one thing if you're doing it for a Russell Wilson or a Deshaun Watson, who's a proven commodity and, Pro Bowl player. But I mean, these are all crapshoots, so that, I mean, I think they'll do it. I mean, they're desperate. I think they will do it. And not only that, but there's other teams there between, Atlanta and them, guys like, Carolina and, who else might move up? There's other teams that could move up.
Yeah. I mean, there's been talk that, even a team from your neck of the woods, the Raiders might be in moving up, because they seem to have, even though this better than me, they seem to have a love-hate relationship with Derek Carr.
God,
it's like,
no kidding.
We love him, but we're willing to get rid of him.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get that. I mean, they just, he's been a real consistent player, and he's not been the reason they've not had a lack of success. He's been a good quality player, but they always seem to just kind of, not give him his due. And I would imagine he probably feels a little bit disrespected, but he's been a team player, and by all accounts here in Las Vegas, a real stand-up guy. So I don't know why he's not getting more respect.
You think if you were to lay odds, something that you know a lot about, being in Vegas, what are the odds of there being a draft day surprise and their car is packaged for the Raiders to move up or just make a change with their quarterback situation?
Ooh. I would say the odds are probably pretty thin. I mean, I just think he's too good of a quarterback, and he's still in his prime. He's what, 29, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
So no, I can't imagine. I'm not a huge Gruden fan, but I think he's got to be more practical than that. And you could win a Super Bowl with Carr. You can definitely win a Super Bowl with Carr, and they've got other holes to fill. So no, I don't think that they'll do that. I can't imagine.
And one of the reasons I get frustrated with Ryan Pace is that he's dug this hole, this deep, deep hole. And you draft Mitchell Trubisky. Many people had him as a number one quarterback coming out that year.
Right.
I didn't particularly like him, but that's a different story. But by Trubisky not having success in 2020, I knew that this was going to be a really huge hole that this team was building for itself, because acquiring a quarterback in 2021, especially after you sneak into the playoffs,
right,
and dropping your draft spot from, I think it was 6 or 7 or maybe 9 all the way to 20, it was like, oh man, I mean, I'm glad they're in the playoffs, but at the same time, Mitchell is not the quarterback of the future, and so it's just going to be such a difficult thing to acquire a quarterback. You're going to have to trade a lot of draft assets, like you say, Brett. And I'm of that school. You build a team through the draft first and foremost. You feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I totally do. I mean, I like the one thing I do like, and this is, I guess, the Vegas in me too. I do like the fact that Pace will roll the dice a little bit, and he'll make big, splashy moves, bring in guys like Khalil Mack, and he's not afraid to make trades and wheel and deal. I appreciate that. I don't want him to be, Ted Thompson, just beholden to the draft and that's it. So I kind of appreciate that, but I just kind of keep thinking back. Of course, things are changing now with all the allegations coming out, but had Pace picked Watson instead of Trubisky, we wouldn't be having any of these conversations. We'd probably be, still championing Ryan Pace, because an all-pro quarterback covers lots of warts and lots of sins. So
sure does.
But he didn't. So here we are.
Yeah, there you go. So I've got you for another 15 minutes. I want to tell our listeners that in about 15, 20 minutes, we're bringing in Vinny Parisi, and besides talking hockey, he is very well versed on football. So we're going to continue our football talk as well. But I want to talk to Brett a little bit about some of the work that he does outside of being a fan of the game of football and sometimes writing about football and sports. Talk to me about, well, it's sports related too. This painting by this painting of Rafael Nadal, the famous tennis player. You sent me this video, and I was just struck by the incredible vividness of this painting. Tell me about the artist. Tell me a little bit about how you became associated with this project, and then we'll show that video for our fans to take a look at.
Yeah, it's an amazing piece of artwork, and this is where I was earlier in the week. I was in Miami for the Miami Open, the big tennis tournament down there, and this piece, like you say, it's an incredible work. It's the only artwork authorized and signed by Rafa himself. What makes it so exceptional is it's got to be something special here in Vegas, but it's by a local artist, Bruce Soulzberg, who does work totally 3D. And the way he does it is he'll paint on up to about 8 different levels of acrylic, but they're all within the same frame. But you'll have certain elements of the action taking place at different elements within the composition. So you'll have, for example, in this piece, Rafa, it's hitting his famous Vamos forehand from the French Open from a few years ago. You've got him on one layer of acrylic. Then you've got the ball and the net painted on another layer. Then you've got the crowd, so on and so forth. So you get that in the proper setting, and it's totally three-dimensional. You move, the ball kind of moves towards the racket. I mean, it is incredible. You really get that sense of motion that you would get watching Nadal play. So it's not only is it an ultimate tribute to a fantastic player and human being, it's got that sizzle and that sense of motion. And the best part about it is it's to benefit a good cause. 20% of the proceeds from every print sold, it's done in an edition, what they call a limited edition of 350. Every print that's sold, 20% goes to the Rafa Foundation, which is a charity that he set up to benefit underprivileged children, specifically with regards to education. So we're overjoyed to be partnered with him on this. And I was really hoping to get a chance to meet him and shake his hand in Miami. Yeah. But unfortunately, he's been battling some back issues and things like that. And he wants to be 100% healthy for the clay court series, which starts here in a few weeks in his native Spain. So unfortunately, he had to bag out of the tournament, but I'm looking forward to hopefully getting him here in Vegas and doing some events once this COVID stuff is behind us.
All right, let's play the video. Do you want to set
it
up?
Yeah, this is actually a video. The artist, Bruce Soulzberg, and Rafa, as Rafa sees it for the very first time and talks a little bit about it and kind of the image behind it and his history with it. So, yeah, it's fun.
Pretty cool. Let's check it out.
How are you?
How are you?
How are you?
Good to see you. Good to see you.
You too. Fine? You ready to see it?
Good. Sure. I hope.
You excited?
I am excited, yeah.
Okay, good. My favorite sport is tennis. It's something that I played in college. It's something that my son plays. And the fact that we are launching this company and doing things in this company with Rafa Nadal, one of the greatest tennis players, if not the greatest tennis player that's ever played the sport, it's very special. And I really hope that when he sees this picture, it really means a lot to him as well. This is the picture that I held when I was painting your picture, okay? So you get to see it. Ready? Go ahead, Steve. You ready?
Sure. Great. So beautiful. It's something different. It's something that I didn't see before. This is very special, this way to create art. I like it immediately.
I did my first art show in 1995 at the New York Art Expo. During those times, it was the heydays of the art world. I realized I had to do something that nobody else had done. And so while I was walking all the aisles and I saw everything that was going on, I realized that everybody was painting flat. Everything was two-dimensional. And just something popped in my head. Paint on layers of glass. Sure enough, I just started seeing things in dimensions. And today, everything was born from just painting on layers of glass.
Great. Well done. Well done.
We wanted to capture you, you know? It's all about you.
That court is the most important place in my career, without any doubt. That forehand is something classic for me.
His forehand is his shot. It shows his raw passion of what he is as a tennis player. That's the best part about that painting. We captured what he's all about. This was actually my favorite picture I sent you. I'm glad you picked this one.
Yeah.
I just that you were like in motion, you know, and you were off the ground. I loved it. That looks awesome. That looks great.
Perfect.
That is a phenomenal piece of artwork. Now, is that a new technique, or is that kind of multi-dimensional approach to painting? Is that something that has been done in the past?
Well, other artists have done it, and Bruce, the artist, has done it for a few years, but he's only recently started applying it to sports. When we first started exhibiting his work, he did it for like man cave wine bottles and things like that. It looked like, you know, you had like bottles of wine on different levels and things. And it was quite cool. But he started applying it to sports, and it really lends itself, because usually when you're doing a two-dimensional painting, it's very stagnant. You just don't get the sense of motion. But with that multi-level acrylic, you really do get the feel of the ball in the air and, you know, the guy, you know, sprawled out for a catch. This piece obviously is kind of his signature piece, and now with Rafa's endorsement, we're really promoting that. But he does commissions. I'm trying to save up my pennies to have him do like a Walter Payton or something,
Ooh,
hurdling a defender. Wouldn't that be cool, that technique?
yes.
And he's a neat guy. He's a local artist we've been involved with for a number of years, and super generous. Obviously, by a good sizable portion of the proceeds going to charity, and we couldn't be happier to be involved. So.
Now, this Walter Payton thing that you'd like to
Yeah.
to do, is that like a personal piece for you or something?
Oh, that would just be a one of a kind. Now, that he typically doesn't do limited editions, but Rafa, like I said, this is the only piece Rafa's ever signed and endorsed. So
Right.
we're doing a limited edition serigraph, like a silk screen on the different layers of acrylic, with him signing each and every one, which is really unheard of because he's never done that before. But the majority of the works that Bruce does are one of a kind. So if I were to commission him to do Walter Payton, it would just be a one of one. So it would certainly have a special place in the old man cave for sure.
Okay, because I was hoping that it would be available for a bidding. I'd be there with you.
Well, this is, again, we're kind of moving down the trail. COVID, as with everything, kind of ground a lot of things to a halt. Bruce was actually in talks with the Raiders about possibly being their official artist and doing all of their players in 3D. And that went as far as talking to the owner, Mark Davis. So that's progressing. Nothing's been finalized yet, but if that happens, again, that's going to open up a lot of doors for some more football pieces, probably more limited edition. And believe me, you better believe I'll be right there lobbying for a Walter Payton limited edition, so everybody in the bar room can get one.
That's pretty wild. And we've got a number of people who have commented and said things like, hey, this is the guy from Pawn Stars. Nation Alvarez said that. He also has, I had no idea he was a Bears fan.
Yes, big time.
A huge Bears fan. Let me play a clip from Pawn Stars. This is from 5 or 6 years ago. And I thought I looked at a number of clips preparing for the show, and I thought this one kind of perfectly, in a condensed manner, captured what you do on that show. Let me ask you first, how did you get involved with Pawn Stars? Did they reach out to you? How'd that happen?
Yeah, they did. And it was kind of out of the blue. I think they first called me right as they were starting their second season. And I didn't get called from like Rick or any of the guys on the show. It was their production company out of New York. Called me and they said, hi, we're Left Field Productions. We produce a show called Pawn Stars, and they need an art expert to come in and take a look at a piece of art that came into the shop. Are you willing to do it? And at the time, I mean, Pawn Stars wasn't the phenomenon that it is now. It was, and so I hadn't, even here in Vegas, I hadn't even heard of it, but I turned to my father, who was sitting at the desk next to me. I said, there's somebody on the phone from a show called Pawn Stars. He's like, oh, talk to him, because he had heard of the show and he was familiar with it. So I ended up coming on the show, evaluating an Erte sculpture, the deco artist.
Yeah.
And I was on the show for, like I say, about 8 years, over 50 episodes, everything from Edward Hopper to Moreau to Picasso to you name it. So it was a good run.
Very cool. And just for our followers and listeners and viewers who are not familiar with the show, can you give us a quick description of the premise?
It's really a neat show that kind of evolved, and while really Las Vegas was in a very depressed time. I mean, obviously it was a depressed time for a lot of people, that recession of 2008, 2009, but it hit Vegas probably harder than anybody. And they had a pawn shop right there on Las Vegas Boulevard. So as you might expect, in times of economic strife, people were coming in with all manner of things that under normal circumstances they wouldn't pawn or sell in a million years. Right. People coming in with, rare antiques and Super Bowl rings and, and things of that nature. So the show came on really at a perfect time. And and Vegas is a melting pot anyway. There's people here from all over the place, both coast, internationally. So you get such a neat dichotomy and a neat mixture of items coming through the shop that you won't get anywhere else in the world. So, and like I say, I mean, just on the art side, which is a small fraction of what they do, I mean, I've gone into appraise original Edward Hopper paintings, Picasso lino cuts, just Moreau originals. I mean, pieces that you would never in a million years expect to see in a Las Vegas pawn shop, but because of where we are and the situation around it, they do. And it's been a hit ever since. It's still running strong. I guess they're still filming, and they're going to, I think a new season begins in the fall. So.
Wow. Pretty cool. Let's watch a clip. Again, this is Pawn Stars, and our man Rhett Maly was looking at a piece of artwork done by Ansel Adams. Here it is.
All right. And this you purchased from the Ansel Adams Gallery?
Yeah, it's came right out of the vault.
Okay. Yeah, this is the family. This is part of the estate. So this is a real legitimate source for Mr. Adams' works. So yeah, this looks good. Okay.
So what's it worth?
Well, it looks like it's in great condition. The signature is clear, it's legible. At auction, you'd expect somewhere in the $15,000 to $20,000 range.
Okay. All right, I know it's worth money now.
Happy to help, Rick.
Okay.
My pleasure.
All right, thanks for coming
All
in, bud.
Nice to meet you.
You too, Good day.
The photograph is really impressive because it's got very clear contrast, a lot of detail. I don't think he'll have much of a problem selling the piece if he's able to make a good deal on it.
All right, so I mean, what's your best price on it?
16 for it.
I mean, I'm more like 11,000 bucks.
Oof. Do you think your price can climb a little higher like Ansel did when he took this photograph?
I will give you 12,000. I can't give you any more. I mean, that is my, if you want my absolute, no negotiating, that's what it is price, that's my price.
Can't do 13?
No, what did I just tell you? No, I mean, literally, if you want 12,000, I'll give you 12,000. I'm not gonna go a penny more.
Okay,
All right.
12,000.
Okay, cool, man. I'll meet you right up front. We'll do some paperwork.
Okay.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, do you ever follow up with Rick to find out what he did with that piece of artwork and see if he made a profit or something like that?
Rick usually makes a profit. He almost always makes a profit. But yeah, there's been very few pieces that I've been involved with that have sat on his shelf or up on the wall for too long. They just get so many people in there, and you got to figure no matter what I appraise it for, once it airs on the show, the value goes up even more. And they always have these as seen on Pawn Star stickers next to everything that's actually been on an episode. So most everything. There's been a couple of pieces that I think where the authenticity was a little bit in question that stuck around for a while, but a slam dunk like that Ansel Adams, I think that was gone in a heartbeat. And yeah.
Wow, great stuff. I always enjoy talking to you. And before I let you go, I hate to ask people to make predictions, but I want to get your sense as to what you think this upcoming season is going to be like. And I know the roster is far from set. There's a whole draft. There's more free agents to be signed and so forth. But based on, past experience with this regime and what they have done with the quarterback position, so forth, are you expecting perhaps another playoff season, or do you think that perhaps this could be a fiasco in the making?
Well, I don't think it'll be a fiasco. I mean, I think we've got too much talent for it to be a fiasco. And I like some of what we've done. I like some of our hires. I like the new defensive coordinator. I like some of the under the radar free agency things. I like Williams, the guy we brought in from KC. And I like Dalton. I think he has the potential. I think he'll outperform where a lot of fans, think he's going to perform. I think we've got some weapons for him. I think he's still a gamer. He's still got some legs and some arm strength. So but again, all that being said, this is not a team that excites me as it is right now. It's not a team that I think, can win the Super Bowl. Could they eke into the playoffs, with that 7th spot? Yeah, I could see. I mean, I hate to fall back on that whole 8-8, but the team just right now just kind of seems blah, not bad enough to where you're going to want to rebuild and start from scratch. but not good enough to make a real serious run. And we've talked about it before. You kind of get in that purgatory without that championship caliber quarterback, and that's unfortunately kind of where the Bears are right now, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good players in this draft that can help this team.
Yeah.
But given that they may need those draft assets to acquire a quarterback, then all of a sudden you're going to miss out on guys in the second, third round who are plug-and-play offensive linemen. From all the scouts we talked to, from our own scouts here at the Barroom, Danny Shimon and Neil Stopchinski, they love this offensive line class, but we might not have a second and third round pick to acquire. And then the wide receiver class is really deep with outstanding players with great speed, cutting ability. But again, are we going to have draft picks to pick up these guys?
I can't see them not swinging for the fences on a quarterback, because I mean, let's just say they go with Andy Dalton and they use all the draft picks on the offensive line in need. Well, Andy Dalton just signed a 1-year contract. You're not going to build around him. So what do you do next year? You're in the same spot. So it's kind of a crappy spot to be in. I'm an optimist, though. I take solace in the fact that we didn't trade 4 first-rounders and a couple of starters for Deshaun Watson. That would not look too good right now. So, so again, it could always be worse, as we know, being Bears fans for a long time. So.
There you go. Again, thanks very much for being on the show. I'd love to get you back in a month or so and have you and Dan Aguirre just talk for an hour or so about football teams from the past. Would really, really love to make that happen. So, again, thanks very much. Let our folks know where they can contact you on Twitter or any other information you'd like to promote, because this also goes out on audio, and so people may not see on the screen your Twitter ad.
Well, the name of our gallery is Art Encounter. That's been a Las Vegas institution for close to 30 years. And the best place to find us is online if you're not here, which is www.artencounter.com. You can also find all sorts of information about Vamos and our relationship with Nadal and the charity that it benefits. So I would encourage anybody who's interested in that piece to go there. And like I say, the artist also does other sports art commissions, things like that. He can put your teenage daughter, if she's into softball, on an original too. So www.artencounter.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, Brett K. Maly.
Very cool.
So,
we've got a big wall in our dining room that needs a painting, so we're going to visit your site and see what we can find there.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well,
all right,
Aldo,
Brett.
thanks again for having me, and tell Dan I'm sorry I missed him, but next time for sure.
Will do. Take care.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
All righty. That is Brett Maly. He is such a great guy. I really enjoy talking with him. And like I said earlier, years ago, he wrote a weekly piece about the Chicago Bears, and he looked back at the history of the Bears team, and he just reminded me of so many cool players that we had and disappointing games, and once in a while an exciting game. He reminded me of that stuff. This old guy forgets about stuff like that pretty quickly, but I have not forgotten to bring in our next guest. This guy is starting a new podcast here at the Barroom Network. He is a guy who I think you're going to find very entertaining. If you don't like Blackhawks hockey, don't go away. We're not going to talk Blackhawks for another hour or so. We're going to talk about football. We're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about his new show. We're going to talk about all sorts of things. Let me bring in my man, Vinny, now. Vinny, there he is. How are you, brother?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Look at you. You're all set up and ready to go. Are you fired up that this is a big week for you and your brother, who is going to co-host the Bar Down Blackhawk Talk podcast?
Oh, yeah. I could not be more excited. Me and Joey have been itching to get this thing going. We're ready to roll. Bar Down Blackhawk Talk is going to be the best Blackhawks podcast on planet Earth. I'm so set for this. We got our notes ready to go. We've been grinding. We're ready. We've been talking. It's going to be a great time. I cannot wait for Wednesday.
I think you can see why I fell in love with Vinny the very first day we talked about doing this podcast, because he's got great confidence, but as you're going to find out, he's got great knowledge, not only about hockey, but of all Chicago sports and all sports, period, just not Chicago. He is a professional sports writer. This is his job. Tell people a little bit about what you do for a living, what you cover, and so forth.
Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. It means a lot to me hearing from someone of your caliber, because I'm such a big fan and have been since it was the NFC North barroom days. I've been following on Twitter for that long.
Thank you.
So yeah, I work for Fansided, big sports and entertainment website, growing every day. Not as big as some of the other ones in the world, but definitely growing each day. Our guy Robert Murray actually today broke the news about the White Sox cutting Lucroy, and he broke the news that they signed Jake Lamb. So there's some big wigs coming up in this company, and it's a pleasure to work for them. I cover for them on DeWindy City, the Chicago Blackhawks, Bulls, Bears, Cubs, and White Sox. And then I'm doing just the White Sox on Southside Showdown, and both of those are like kind of like individual spectrums of the Fansided world. They are individual websites under the Fansided umbrella, if you will. So yeah, just working on covering those teams, and it's finally nice to have a place where I can babble on about those teams rather than just write about them.
Now, one of the things that's interesting about the podcast that you're going to do here on the Barroom Network, again, it's called Bar Down Blackhawk Talk. It's with Vinny and Joey. And as I say here, the gloves are dropped. These two brothers are going to talk about hockey, and these two guys have such a great chemistry. They argue. Well, like before I get to the question I was going to ask, but share with our followers and listeners and viewers, share with them some of the stuff that you argue with your brother about, like the whole straw thing.
Yeah. So me and Joey, you can take a topic of conversation that involves some sort of analysis or discussion, and you could determine what side we should argue for or against. It doesn't even have to be our actual opinion. Just tell us what side, and we will go at it for hours. So some of the past topics we've argued is how many straws or how many holes are in a straw.
How many holes are in a straw? I never even thought about even considering that, but you really went at it.
Yeah, I adamantly think there's only one hole in a straw, and this kid will argue that there's two, and we'll just go at it. There's been what was the other one? How many, or are there more chairs or human beings on planet Earth? I adamantly believe there's more chairs than human beings, and so that was one we eventually agreed on after basically 45 minutes of arguing.
I have to agree with that. Although, there are a lot of countries where, sitting down on the floor is the custom and so forth. But there are also hotels that just have billions of chairs for conventions and so forth. So I tend to agree with you on that one. The whole straws thing, I've been debating. Actually, I got into a debate with my wife today because I was telling her the story, and she goes, "There's only one hole." And I go, "No, how can there be one hole? There's one on this end and one on this end." So she's with you on that one.
Oh yeah, my favorite that I get that argument on the chair one. People are like, "Well, what about third world countries where chairs aren't at a premium?" But I literally think the United States, Canada, and Mexico alone make up for the amount of chairs. And you go to a store, if you buy every chair on the shelf at any given store, and you go back there the very next day, guess what, pal? That shelf is going to be restocked with chairs to the fullest. So I don't know. And the straw thing, a donut has one hole. So like, why is that only one hole, but a straw's two? Just because the density. Yeah, we could go on all night about straw.
Wait a minute. Guess who doesn't agree with you? Look at this. Joey! Joey!
What a clown. What a clown.
My brother says, wait a minute, it's clear that there are two holes in the straw.
Now, if people are watching this and are not just itching to tune in on Wednesday, I don't know what to tell them, because if we can argue through the comment section here, just wait till the show, guys. Like, we're so set for this show.
Yeah, this is going to be really, really incredible. I can't wait for it. It's Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Is it 2 o'clock? I wrote down 2 o'clock, and I started asking myself, is it really 2 o'clock? And I just said, I'll put it at 2 o'clock, and I'll change it later.
Yeah, we never really came to a set time. You can break the news to the fans right now if you want to set a time. We're ready whenever.
All right. Well, Wednesday at 2:00 right here on our YouTube channel, and the audio version will be sent out all over iTunes, you name it, and so forth. You can also check out the video feed on our Facebook page, on our Twitter page, and so forth. So it's going to be all over. We'll continue to promote the hell out of it. I'm really, really proud of the knowledge these guys are going to bring to the show, but also just their personalities. These guys are a blast to listen to. And then speaking of knowledge, let's talk a little bit about the Chicago Bears, because I know it's a team near and dear to you. Look at the face he's making.
What a mood swing.
Exactly. So clearly you're not happy with the way this offseason is going. And do you have any sense of hope that come draft time, Ryan Pace can correct this big ship better than that ship that's stuck in the Gulf of Suez and is blocking traffic? Can he correct this thing and get this team moving in the right direction?
So I'm an optimistic person by nature. When I'm rooting for my sports teams, if I go into a year believing that they have no chance, like then you're a Detroit Lions fan. Like then you have the worst record in the 16-game season era. Like, but for me right now, that's kind of where I'm at. And I'm not going to promise the folks at home that by, August 15th, I'm not going to be all in. I'm not going to see Andy Dalton complete a pass to Allen Robinson in a preseason game and be like, oh, well, he looks good. He's looking good. I can't promise that I won't be, on the bandwagon by that point. But right now, it's just a puke show. Mm-hmm. That team stinks. And then you look at their schedule, and it's a second-place schedule. So they got the New York Football Giants from the NFC, who are the second-place team from that, poopy NFC least division last year. But guess what? They made a lot of roster improvements this year. One of my favorite players in the NFL is Kenny Golladay, because I'm an NIU guy. I love NIU.
Yeah.
He's going to go over there and make Daniel Jones look better than he is. So that's trouble for the Bears. Saquon Barkley is going to be back after basically missing the whole year. They're going to play Tampa Bay because, woe is me, Tampa Bay came in second place last year. So they're going to have to play Tampa Bay. They're going to play the Rams for the 1,000th year in a row. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure they have the entire NFC West, if I'm not mistaken. So they're going to be playing the Seahawks. The Cardinals are going to be wildly improved. Even if you just look at the schedule, the makeup of the season, the outlook just doesn't look very good. And Matthew Stafford on the Rams, that makes them right there with Tampa Bay and Green Bay as a Super Bowl contender, in my opinion. You might take the Saints out of the equation by, Drew Brees retiring, but you had the Rams up there. As long as Seattle hangs on to Russell Wilson, that's a team. You're going to play Green Bay twice. I like the look of the Vikings. The Vikings are always kind of like the Bears in the sense that, like, they could either go 7-9 or they'll have that one-off year where they're 12-4. They're trouble for the Bears. Even if Jared Goff comes to town and beats the Bears at Soldier Field one time with Detroit, I'm not going to be surprised. So based on the moves that they've made this offseason, Andy Dalton might be a downgrade from Mitch. I know people don't want to hear that, but Andy Dalton legitimately might be a downgrade. At least Mitch can run. And if Matt Nagy ever used his brain, he could, there are ways to design success for Mitch, at least to be the 20th best quarterback. Robert Quinn was, kind of a terrible signing. They got worse by getting rid of Fuller. So pretty weird noise coming out of my mouth for someone who claims they're an optimistic person by nature, but totally out on the Bears right now. Now, if they take pick 20 and they trade it up to 9 and somehow land Trey Lance, even though Adam Schefter is claiming that 4 of the first 5 picks are going to be quarterbacks, which you would assume Trey Lance falls into that category.
Sure.
It's really hard. Like, does Penei Sewell, or however you pronounce his name, from Oregon, who opted out of the season, does he fall to 20 because he didn't play? I'm pessimistic on that. Mm-hmm. So, like you mentioned before, I was listening a little earlier while I was in the waiting room. It's a very good offensive lineman draft.
Right.
They need a left tackle. To me, that's there are 4 keys. There are 4 pillars to winning football teams in my brain. And if you watch the Patriots, the Steelers, the Broncos, it's offensive line, quarterback, pass rush, and then a good set of weapons. So the Bears really don't have much of that anymore. And I just think it's looking bleak right now for sure.
Yeah, it is looking bleak. And our previous guest, Brett Maly, and I looked over the draft order, and we were trying to determine, what are the opportunities to draft up and grab one of these premier quarterbacks. There's 5 quarterbacks considered, guys who are first round worthy and so forth. These first 3 teams, are definitely drafting quarterbacks. San Francisco did not move into via trade into the 3rd spot overall because they are thinking about a wide receiver. I just don't believe that. I think that they are ready to move on from Garoppolo, despite reports that they've given him a vote of confidence. That's usually, what do they say about a vote of confidence? It's the kiss of death. And so there's 3 quarterbacks definitely taken there. Atlanta could pick the quarterback, although a lot of people are saying trade. That's a trade possibility, but Matt Ryan is what, 67, 80 years old or something like that. So, maybe they're going to pick a quarterback. So that's 4 quarterbacks right there. And so you've got to start. I'm sure Pace has already been talking to Atlanta, and I'm sure he's been doing a lot of talking with Cincinnati and Miami to see if there's a trade possibility there. What are your thoughts? What do you give up to move into, that 4th, 5th, or 6th spot of the draft?
Yeah, so you pulled up that order, makes it a little easier to play fake GM in your brain.
Sure.
Outside of Miami, I'm a fan of Tua Tagovailoa. I know some people are out on him. I'd like to see what this guy can do. And if you're picking at 6, you're not getting Zach Wilson or Trevor Lawrence. So it's hard to say that any of those guys, whether it be Trey Lance, Justin Fields, or Mac Jones, it's hard to just say they're better than Tua. So if I'm Miami, I'm sticking with Tua, and I'm drafting one of those linemen or maybe one of those Alabama receivers. There's the big 2 that are going to go in the 1st round this year. Outside of Miami, I think, and maybe Dallas, I'm taking a quarterback if I'm any of those 10 teams, and one of the big 5 are there for me. Because Denver had a wide receiver playing quarterback for them at one point last season. Carolina, I hee and haw about Teddy Bridgewater. Detroit has Jared Goff. He's replaceable for sure. And like you said, Matt Ryan's Joe Burrow. Forgot about Joe Burrow. So outside of Cincinnati too.
Right.
But yeah, there's no way that a quarterback even comes close to pick 20 unless we're talking like Kyle Trask. And I'm not a Kyle Trask guy at all. I think he's an okay 2nd or 3rd round quarterback option. If they get him there and try to develop him behind the Red Rocket, that's fine, but not taking him in the 1st round by any means. So that loose 15 streak next to Jacksonville is really something else. And then there's the Jets, lost 1. You talk about, I heard you mention the Bears with a couple meaningless wins towards the end of the season. Right. That takes their pick up from 9 to 20. Imagine being a Jets fan and you're going from 1 as almost a lock and you win 2 at the end of the season. Hottest team in the league to end the year.
How about that? How true is that? Here, I want to share with you, let me get rid of this and then bring up this draft order, on our show, Draft on Tap. Danny Shimon, who has been scouting players for the Bar Room now for 4 years, and Neil Stopchinski, who has joined us this year. I asked them, give me your latest board on the quarterbacks and what round you think that they will be drafted or are deserving to be drafted. So, because on this particular show, Draft on Tap, which is on Thursdays at 8:00, we're working our way all the way up to the draft. And that week of the draft, we're going to have a simulated draft. And I'm playing the role of general manager Ryan Pace, and Neil and Danny are going to try to sway me on what to do. We're already talking about trade scenarios and so forth. But if that doesn't happen, who do we target in the 2nd round and 3rd round? Here on the left is Danny Shimon's list. He's got, as does Neil, these 5 quarterbacks in the first round. And where they deviate, though, is that Neil Stopchinski has Mac Jones at number 3. So he's got Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Mac Jones as the top 3 quarterbacks coming out in this draft. And Danny Shimon has Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and then Zach Wilson. And then Danny goes on to have Mac Jones at number 4, Trey Lance at number 5, and over at those first rounders, it's Fields and for Neil Stopchinski, those other first rounders are Justin Fields and Trey Lance. Do you sort of see it the same way or similarly in terms of who should be drafted in that first round, the order of your quarterbacks?
I'm looking at this list, and like you mentioned, Danny and Neil are experts. They're super smart dudes. They have forgotten more than I could ever know when it comes to critiquing quarterbacks, but I can't say I agree with any of their lists. The one I agree with probably more than the other is Neil, because I don't see Trask as a first-round quarterback at all. There's 5 that go in the first for me. I'd be reluctant to take Trask in the second round.
I'm with you on that. I think he's a third rounder.
Yeah, so do I. I probably would throw him in the third round too. It's interesting to me that Danny has Fields at 2 instead of Wilson. I would go Wilson 2, but having Fields at 4 for Neil is just – is he a Michigan fan?
I don't think so. One of the things that Danny loves about Justin Fields is his athleticism, and he thinks that he can make all of those throws. He's concerned, of course, of Fields' small portfolio of work, just like he is with Zach Wilson. But he just loves the athleticism that Fields offers a little bit more than what Zach Wilson and Mac Jones offer. And I got to tell you, I am on the Mac Jones bandwagon. I just really believe that this guy, his superior intellect, his accuracy, the fact that he played the big games. Now, he doesn't have that big portfolio of players that you want to see, but he has played in big games, and a lot of people say, yeah, but he had all these great targets to throw to. He had a professional offensive line, and that's all true. But I've seen enough tape to see him make tough throws, complete tough passes under duress, and with receivers who were tightly guarded. And at the Senior Bowl, I watched all of those practices that were available on the NFL Network. And there he was over and over again, this time against level competition on both sides of the football, and he was making the throws. So I'm all in on Mac Jones. But bottom line is this. Any one of these top 5 quarterbacks, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, put them in whatever order you want. If any one of them was a member of the Chicago Bears, I would be throwing the biggest party in Arlington Heights, Illinois, in the history of this small town.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm all in on Mac Jones as well. You said it yourself. People almost discredit him for having a NFL somewhat caliber offensive line, 2 NFL future receivers to throw to. What do you think he's going to get when he gets to the NFL? Well, he's going to have an NFL offensive line, and he's going to have receivers who are just as good as the ones at all 32 NFL teams are college all-stars. So it's going to be more of the same as far as being surrounded by talent. Some NFL teams have more talent than others, looking at you, Chicago Bears. But Mac Jones showed to me, like, he picked apart Clemson's defense, and Trevor Lawrence, he outplayed Trevor Lawrence, who is the generational talent, next Andrew Luck, next Peyton Manning, next, big thing that's going to come out. And Mac Jones is just a winner. He beats teams however he needs to. And I feel like he's the type of quarterback who can win a game by throwing for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, or he can play the quote-unquote game manager role where if he needs to throw for 200 yards and run the crap out of the ball in order to beat that specific team on that specific day. Like, I'm in no way, shape, or form comparing him to the GOAT, Tom Brady. But if you look at Tom's playoff, his stat line is borderline ugly against the Saints. And then it was awesome against the Chiefs. But guess what? He did what he needed to do to win. And that's what I like in Mac Jones. I'm on the Zach Wilson bandwagon too, but that Mitchell Trubisky comparison creeps into my mind a little bit. Going to a lesser traditional football school. You know, he goes to BYU. Mitch went to North Carolina.
Yep.
Only played the 1 year. Barely was, he had good statistics, of course, and he's very athletic. But you wonder if that'll translate to the NFL. It really didn't for Mitch, other than the athleticism part, because he's just a naturally gifted human being in terms of athleticism. But outside of Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones has done a lot of winning. And like we said, Alabama, we know it's an elite program. Those guys all are NFL guys. Nick Saban is there. But I don't know, just the winning that has taken place and the statistics he's put up, it's got to be at least something in the Chicago Bears' minds that, like you said, we're sort of going to throw a party if we land any of those 5 guys. Not only is that embarrassing, although it's true, it's something that they have to consider. And if they drafted 2 guys, if they found a way to get Mac Jones and then ended up with Davis Mills, I don't think that's a stupid thing to do. When you're the Bears, you draft as many as you can get because you're going nowhere until you figure it out.
Yeah, now there is a counter argument to that, and I actually did some homework. I should have had it handy here, but the miss rate on first round quarterbacks is a lot lower, of course, right? Common sense, than it is on players drafted in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. And Greg Ballard was a candidate for the Chicago Bears general manager position, but lost out to Ryan Pace for some reason. He had a press conference right after the Colts season, and he was talking about that topic about drafting a quarterback every year. And he said, we want to, but at the same time, you're not going to draft somebody that you don't like just for the sake of drafting a quarterback when there's other guys on your board that you're going to like. Well, I think that this year is a year that you invest. If for some reason we don't land that first round quarterback, one of those top 5, then you definitely need to invest in a Davis Mills in round 3 like Danny Schimmon has him, or round 4 like Neil Stopchinski has him, or Sam Ehlinger. I'm not as big a fan of Sam Ehlinger as Danny has. Danny's been touting him for 2 years now. But Sam Ehlinger in round 3, if Kellen Mond is there at round 4, holy cow, you got to pick him up. Jamie Newman, round 5, as both Danny and Neil have him, you got to pick him up. In fact, if Jamie Newman is available in round 4, I'm picking him up, man. I am picking him up, and I am telling him, here's your playbook. Start studying it because you have a great chance to be the starting quarterback of the Chicago Bears in 2022. There's just some promising guys in these top 10 quarterbacks that both these guys have listed that you got to take a swing at. But I'm with you. You need to take more swings at the quarterback position in more drafts. There's no doubt about it, brother.
They're going to add that 17th game, and they still probably won't have a 4,000-yard quarterback for the 100th year of their franchise existence. And like you said, in the first round, you're so much more likely to land a guy who's going to be successful for you. Mm-hmm. But it definitely shouldn't be something not considered to take somebody in the later rounds. If they took a Jamie Newton, they would have to try, because not everybody's going to be Russell Wilson or Tom Brady, those late round quarterbacks who made a successful career for themselves. But eventually one will hit, right? If you keep trying over and over again, they definitely need to reevaluate who's making the decision on who. Mm-hmm. Ryan Pace can't pick a quarterback or anyone in the first round to save his life. But they definitely, like you said, you got to do it. Even if it's a round too early, you're winning nothing without a quarterback. Let's look at the final 4 teams the last 10 years. This year it was Buffalo, Kansas City, Tampa Bay, and Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers Tom Brady, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes, who were probably the 4 best quarterbacks in the NFL this season. So it is by far even back in their prime, Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, NFC or AFC championship after AFC championship. The year Cam Newton won the MVP, they go to the Super Bowl. Who'd they lose to? Peyton Manning. It's the most important position in all of sports. You know, I'm a hockey guy. I'm a baseball guy. I love every sport. I want to watch every sport. And, when you watch every sport like that, there's only one guy you can pinpoint when you're watching all those games, and it's the person under center in the game of football. It is the most impactful position you could ever have, and they need to just grind until they find that guy.
Yep. Totally with you on that. I'm being told that I should really take a look at the Kellen Mond's tape. He is accurate with the football. And I agree that Kellen Mond has excellent athleticism. He throws a good ball and so forth. But there has been questions about whether he could be fit into this Matt Nagy offense, and which leads us to this whole other topic. Should Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace be involved in selecting the next quarterback of the Chicago Bears from the draft, even if it's a day 2 or day 3 quarterback? Should they be the ones picking these guys? Now, I do have a certain amount of faith that Matt Nagy is a better judge of quarterback talent than Ryan Pace, and that Matt Nagy, along with John DeFilippo and Bill Lazor and so forth, that they're consulting with the Bears coaching staff, that they're probably going to make a better choice than Ryan Pace, who was so enamored with the card Mitch Trubisky drove that he went out of his way to mention it multiple times at the press conference and afterwards and so forth. That should not be a factor, Ryan Pace, while you're selecting a guy to quarterback your team, not his allegiance to an old automobile. But, I just feel like this team needs to look at a Kellen Mond, but I'm not totally convinced he fits Matt Nagy's offense. And so why draft him? And again, why is Matt Nagy involved in rebuilding this offense if he's not assured that he's going to be here long term? What are your thoughts on the future of this team and the people making this decisions, and whether they're going to be around in a year or two?
I think, you ever hear the term like a rock stuck in a hard place? Mm-hmm. Like the fact that Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy seem to be married to each other in terms of their, contributions to the Chicago Bears kind of stinks, because Matt Nagy was hired by Ryan Pace, but his track record on quarterbacks before being connected to Ryan Pace was pretty good. When he was with Philly, they took Wentz, and people say whatever they want about Wentz. We wish we traded for him now. Mm-hmm. And he was really good with Philly in that offense. Now, Matt Nagy wasn't entirely running the show there, but he was heavily involved. Mm-hmm. There's reason they made the Nick Foles connection when he first came aboard. So Matt Nagy clearly had some pull in Philly. And so, and when he gets to Kansas City, there are many, many, many reports that it was his initial idea to draft Patrick Mahomes. If you go back to 2017 and you look at all the big boards, whether it be Adam Schefter, what's his name, Mel Kiper Jr., all those guys, they had Patrick Mahomes as the number 3 guy. Mm-hmm. And those guys, they weren't involved in the game in terms of managing or anything, front office work. But there's no doubt that they know what they're talking about for the most part. And people listen to those guys, and they all had Patrick Mahomes below. And it was Matt Nagy who went to Andy Reid and said, I want must draft, get him under any circumstances, Patrick Mahomes. And Matt Nagy convinced him of that. And Andy Reid went and he did the interview. And after 4 hours, 5 hours go by, this story is well known. And he's like, that's my guy. And Matt Nagy was right. So Ryan Pace, Andy Dalton, Mitchell Trubisky, Nick Foles, Mike Glennon, his track record stinks, and Matt Nagy's is awesome. So it feels like we're stuck in that John Fox era where we're going into a season knowing that they're going to be fired afterward. Yep. So are we just going to redo this whole thing with whoever they draft this year? Are they going to be the next Mitchell Trubisky where they get thrown into the fire and don't develop? Patrick Mahomes sat for a year. I think he started week 17 of that 2018 season.
Right.
But other than that, it was all Alex Smith. Deshaun Watson is a little bit different, in my opinion. He was less of a project, but more of a winner. I kind of see Mac Jones in a similar light, with maybe a little less talent than Deshaun Watson. But Mitchell Trubisky needed to be supported and put in a system. And Matt Nagy, he was wrong. He was wrong in terms of he wasn't able to coach him. So you can be a great evaluator of talent, but he couldn't figure out a way to make Mitch successful. And that's really what stings going into this year. So you asked me about the direction of the Bears. It just feels like it's going nowhere because Matt Nagy might be able to find a quarterback, but is he going to be there to develop him? Is the next guy going to come in and, change the way they do things? Are they going to hire a defensive-minded coach? And they need to stop hiring guys who are specialties, these quarterback whisperers. Go out and hire the best possible coach you can hire and build something around that instead of trying to fix something on your roster that's clearly not working.
Mm-hmm. Zach says, okay, so if Mahomes was Nagy's guy in 2017, I need to know who is this guy this year. I need to know it right now. Who do you think, given what you know about Matt Nagy, the offense that he ran at Kansas City, the quarterback that he was, because he loves to talk about his days playing quarterback, and the systems that he tried to run here in Chicago, out of these quarterbacks, which one do you think he might have his eye on and is telling Ryan Pace, Ryan, you got to do whatever you can to get this guy? Who do you think it might be?
It's tough to assume that guy even exists.
That's right. His name is Matt Nagy Jr. and he's not born yet.
Yeah. If Matt Nagy, if I had to pick someone who kind of fits that, Matt Nagy looks at that guy and goes, oh, I can work with you.
Mm-hmm.
I get Trey Lance popped in my head first.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, because Mac Jones is kind of, wouldn't you say Mac Jones is more of like a pocket passer, like throwing it to his receivers, like a less athletic version of Mitch, obviously with better arm talent and decision making. But for some reason, Trey Lance kind of popped in my head right when I first read that question. Although I forget what you said his name was, I couldn't agree with that guy more. Mm-hmm. If Matt Nagy has a guy, you got to go for it. You got to listen to him.
Yeah, it was Zach that asked the question. By the way, Zach says that my clock looks a lot better than your clock. And the reason Zach says that is because, first of all, it's true. And second of all, my clock was a gift from Zach Sullivan. So be nice to Zach. Maybe you'll get your clock too.
Zach, I like hockey. I like baseball. I like rock music. I like video games. Any kind of cool clock you can find with any of those things. At Vinny Parisi on Twitter. It's right there. My DMs are open, pal.
I love it. Now, at the press conference, when Matt Nagy was asked, what he was asked that question. He was asked, what is your preference at a quarterback? And he listed these three things. I'm relying on my faulty memory, but he talked about leadership. He talked about athleticism, the ability to move around, but then added, but if we don't get one, we can work around that. And then I think the third thing, and this is not in order, but I think the third thing that he said was the processing in a quarterback that's a good processor. Well, clearly, Mac Jones is not going to wow people with his athleticism and his mobility and so forth. Now, he does have great pocket awareness, and he's able to sidestep and create a little bit of time, but he's never going to be confused with Trey Lance, for instance. A lot of, like you said, Trey Lance might fit that mold of that Matt Nagy wants, although Trey doesn't have that big Trey Lance doesn't have that big portfolio and has not faced top-notch competition, but there's clearly the eye doesn't lie. This guy's got some tremendous skills. So it's going to be interesting beyond the first round, if they can't land one of these 5 quarterbacks, is which one of those guys is a Matt Nagy quarterback? And I do think that it's probably more of a guy like Kellen Mond than Jamie Newman, who I would prefer Newman over Mond. And a lot of people are killing me in the chat room with that point of view. But I got a feeling that maybe Nagy has told Ryan Pace, out of that second tier of quarterbacks, Kellen Mond might be the guy that I'm most interested in working with.
And if that's the case, then they gotta do it, because Matt Nagy's system clearly, I don't believe he's a good coach. I believe he's a good evaluator of talent, and I believe he can put the right guys in position to succeed. But the problem is they don't have the right guys. So if Mund is that guy, then they should be all in on doing it, because he tried to work with the Bears offense like the offense was being ran in Kansas City. But guess what? They don't have Patrick Mahomes. Mm-hmm. They don't have anybody like him. Russell Wilson. I think that's the reason I was all in on it, was because of Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes. Smaller statue guy, but similar skill sets, accurate throws, can move. Similar to Aaron Rodgers, even. Deshaun Watson comes to mind too. Kyler Murray, a little less, but he's a little different in my opinion. But yeah, if that's the guy he identifies as a guy who can work in his offense, and it would only cost a 4th-round pick. He gave up a 4th-round pick for Nick Foles. You can waste a 4th-round pick on a quarterback that you might be able to insert into your offense, or at least in practice, and let Andy Dalton stink up the joint this year with their second-place schedule, come in 3rd in the division with their bad division with their bad schedule, because I think 3-13 or 3-14 with 17 games now could literally get them in 3rd. The Lions are that stinky. But it's a tough spot to be in, because we're doing this again. When Jay left, it was like, what's going to happen next? They drafted Mitch, and it was like, okay, we got our guy. This guy can own the city. They'll give him keys to City Hall if he's slightly above average. If he's Derek Carr, he could win the Super Bowl. And it just all fell under. So if that's the guy that he determines, Ryan Pace should try to save his own job.
Yep. Totally agree. Earlier, we got a question regarding Bobby Massey and the fact that he is still yet to show up on the official NFL transaction as being somebody that's been released. But my research tells me he's now no longer a part of the Chicago Bears. I don't know why he hasn't been listed on that release. I don't know how up to date that is, but Bobby Massey himself has talked with reporters about his release and the fact that he's going. Was he signed somewhere else, Bobby Massey? But bigger question is the offensive line. Whoever is the quarterback of this offense needs an offensive line that's going to protect him and allow that quarterback time to make plays. What do you think about the interior of the offensive line? I personally think that with Sam Mustipher at center, James Daniels at left guard, moving Cody Whitehair to the right guard, and having Alex Bars as a swing player, I think that the middle of the line is pretty strong. I think it could be as strong as it was during Kyle Long's heydays with the Chicago Bears. It's the 2 tackle positions that we have to be concerned of. Everyone is supposing that Jermaine Ifedi is going to move into that right tackle position, and Charles Leno is going to, at least for one more season, be the starting left tackle. What's your overall evaluation on the OL?
It got better as the season went along. They were near the bottom of the league for the first 8-9 games of the season, especially through that 6-game losing streak. They looked really tough. I think putting Mitch back in made them appear a little better, because he's not a complete statue back there like Foles was. So if a defensive line is able to get a little bit of pressure, the offensive line is good enough to protect a guy like Mitch, who could kind of extend plays a little bit, but Nick Foles just had no chance. So when they put him back in, they kind of succeeded a little bit towards the end of the year, looked a little better. Look, when I say they succeeded, they were the 20th best offensive line, which is a significant upgrade from being the 31st or the 32nd. But I agree with you that the tackle, are we in agreement that the tackle is the most important offensive line position besides maybe the center?
Nope.
You think it's a guard?
Yeah, I think that the interior of the offensive line is the most important position now because the game has changed so dramatically where it's not like back in the day where Joe Theismann would take a 5 or 7 step drop, look, and throw the ball downfield, for 40 yards, and then Lawrence Taylor is breaking his legs. Offenses are now getting rid of the ball more quickly than ever before. And so every quarterback will tell you what's the most important part of the protection process. I need to be able to step up in the pocket. And so that's why a lot of teams have moved some of their best pass rushers for certain downs into that middle of the line because they know that quarterback is taking a 2 or 3 step drop and getting rid of the ball quickly. And so they'll put, look at Aaron Donald. He's a pure defensive tackle. But the biggest reason the Rams defense is as great as it is because he's there in the middle providing pressure, and the Bears defense is always best when Akeem Hicks is providing that pressure from the middle. And so that I personally think I've had this argument with other people here at the bar room. I personally think that things have shifted and that while it's more difficult to play the offensive tackle position, you need a more athletic big man, and those guys are harder to find. But I think that it's much more important to have a really strong interior of the offensive line. That's how I feel.
You make a very compelling, thoughtful argument, and it's hard to disagree with because I do think the perception is that the tackle is the more quote unquote important. They're all important, but the more important. But you think about Tom Brady. Why is he able to play till he's 44? Well, because he's amazing. That's part of it. But he gets rid of the ball in record time.
Right.
He's not taking hits the way that some of these other guys are. Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers. Like, he's not getting hit that way. So you make a good point on the guard being equally as important. For the Bears, what's missing to me is the 2 tackle positions, specifically the blind side. Most quarterbacks are right-handed, so it would be the left tackle. So I'm with you. If they're not doing quarterback, I'm addressing that because it can improve the way that the rest of the group plays if they figure out that position. Like you said, it's so hard to find because you basically need a mix of a true big man and a tight end because you need the fat guy who can move quickly and be athletic is basically what it is. And like you said, it's hard to find. Most of the big boys are just big walls. Mm-hmm. But someone like Gronk, if he could play tackle, that would do wonders for his, just someone of that ilk.
Mm-hmm. Now, I wanted to talk about the tight end position, and if we're going to talk about the tight end position, we've got to talk about why is Jimmy Graham still on the roster? Now, Jimmy Graham had a really good season. I think he was second among all tight ends in touchdown catches and probably would have had another 2 or 3 if they wouldn't have taken him out of the red zone a number of times. I was like, you got this guy so he can play in the red zone. Why is he on the bench? Different story. But what I want to say is before we evaluate tight ends, is he still on the roster because maybe there's a chance that the Russell Wilson trade is going to happen around draft time and that they want to keep Russell happy because he's got such a good relationship with Jimmy Graham, both on the field and off the field? What do you think?
Yeah, Jimmy Graham's tenure in Seattle kind of goes forgotten a little bit because I don't think he was quite as successful there as people thought he was going to be. He was coming off that awesome year with the Saints, and people were like, Russell Wilson's on Seattle now. They still got the Legion of Boom and Russell Wilson. They're going to be – and it didn't quite lead to a Super Bowl, but you're right. They definitely have some chemistry, and it's certainly something to keep an eye on. I didn't even think of that. Mm-hmm. They annoyed the crap out of me with their lack of usage of Cole Kmet last season. You wasted a second-round pick on this guy. One of your 2 second-round picks. and he had a really good season for Notre Dame. It's like, yeah, we might finally have our tight end. I'm thinking of, I brought up the Final Four quarterbacks of last year. Mm-hmm. Well, the Gronkowski running that 2 tight end set in Tampa Bay, the guy in Kansas City, Travis Kelce, right. And then, of course, San Francisco, blanking on his name.
Kittle.
Yeah, George Kittle. He's awesome, too. They're probably, Gronk's not in his heyday anymore, but, they're 3 of the 5 best tight ends of the last 20 years, and they're in the Super Bowls. Like, it's good to have a good tight end to throw to. And you're thinking, can Cole Kmet be that guy? We'll see. But at least they're trying. They recognize it as an issue that they're wasting using a second-round pick on a tight end. So keeping Graham in the mix is definitely something strange, not something I expected. But like we've said basically for an hour now, they've only done things we don't expect.
That is so true. So, I think I would love to see Jimmy Graham back regardless of who's the quarterback. And so I think that as long as the team uses these 2 tight end sets more effectively, and for the first 6-7 games of the season, Cole Kmet was just a safety valve. They weren't calling any plays at all for that rookie tight end. He said it in press conferences, I'm just happy to be, a safety valve for the quarterback. And that to me was, hey, they're not calling any plays for me. And it was so. I mean, if they did, they weren't calling many, that's for sure. And I understand they were fighting for a playoff spot. They wanted to get the veteran involved and so forth. But my hope is for this upcoming season that if Graham and Cole Kmet are both on the roster, we're going to see a lot of that 12 package with 2 tight ends, and those guys are going to get, minimum 4 to 7 targets per game, because you can have, as the Tom Brady and the Patriots proved, you can have a very effective offense if you've got 2 tight ends like a Gronkowski and a Hernandez, as long as one of them is not a serial killer. So what about the wide receiver position? We've got Darnell Mooney, who I believe is one of the attaboy Ryan Pace selections, 5th round draft pick, if I recall correctly. And there's going to be really good wide receivers in this upcoming draft in the 5th round. And hopefully A-Rob is not going to be dealt during the draft, although I think that is a potential that can happen. But what do you think about the wide receiver position? I know a lot of people in the chat room are saying we need to add more weapons on the outside. So are you hoping that the Bears find a good wide receiver in this draft, or do you think if we go into the season with A-Rob, Anthony Miller, Darnell Mooney, and who else? Riley Ridley? Are you satisfied at all? I don't think you are.
Certainly not. I think Robinson's a number 1. Before this season, I saw him as if you said he was a top 10 wide receiver, I would have said, okay, probably 9 or 10, but yeah. Or even if he's 11 or 12, that's fine. Mooney, to me, if he's your number 3, you're set. Like, he could be a number 3 on a championship team, especially if a guy like Robinson is the number 1. Now you need a guy to throw to them, but you also need a number 2. And they offered Galladay. It was kind of an insulting offer based on his production. But if you have – that's 2 number 1s, in my opinion, if you have Galladay on the opposite side of Allen Robinson. Yep. But I'm not satisfied. Anthony Miller has basically been a bum since they traded up to draft him. He's very loud on Twitter, and that's about the only time he's ever loud. So it's hard for me to go into this season – with just confident in the wide receivers, especially knowing that, well, if you had somebody competent throwing them the football, they might make them look better than they are. Like they used to say Bill Belichick would go pick up the local Walmart cashier and make them a wide receiver and it would work. That just doesn't happen here. They need somebody. I remember when I first started getting into football, I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad about their age, but when I first started getting into football, Musa Muhammad was the Bears' number 1. Oh, God. And he used to say, this is where receivers go to die. And guys are still saying it 15 years later, and it just makes me crazy. It's like, am I ever going to escape this? I've been hearing it since my childhood. So right now they have okay receivers. The Mooney pick was awesome. Last year you heard nothing other than awesome wide receiver draft. Awesome wide receiver draft. You heard it over and over again. And the Bears got one of those guys. If Ryan Pace would have hit on 25% more of his first and second round picks, he'd be viewed as one of the better drafters. I'm going to say this. Some people are going to hit me in the chat hard on this. I'm going to say it, though. He would be considered one of the better drafters in the history of the Chicago Bears because he hit on some awesome late-round picks. That is undeniable. I can't wait till he gets fired. But you can't deny the one thing he's done good, and that's fourth round, fifth, and sixth picking talent. But the first rounds is where you win championships, and it just hasn't worked out. So I'm all in on Mooney and Robinson if Robinson sticks around. If he leaves, they're in rough shape on offense all around.
Alex Sims says, think Riley Ridley is good, but he never fucking plays. He's going to leave the Bears and go ball out somewhere else. Just another shit stain Nagy will leave us with. And, you know, the guy comes out of Georgia and he is applauded for his route running. And then we hear this story. It's never been substantiated by the Chicago media, but somebody told us, hush, hush, Riley really got into an argument with Matt Nagy regarding running a route, and so they got into it, which is why he rarely played in his rookie season. Well, if Riley Ridley is still on the bench because Matt Nagy is holding some grudge against him, then Nagy really needs to go. You don't do that to a guy that you drafted. And at the time, the Bears were pretty solid at the wide receiver position. Everybody was saying, well, you invested in Anthony Miller, you got this guy, you got that way. And so why are you drafting Riley Ridley? Well, because they really loved him coming out of Georgia, and his brother was tutoring him on route running, and he was expected to be a steal. But he just hasn't seen the field, and that is very, very concerning. There's got to be, is this another Ryan Pace draft pick because he really is not playing well in practice, and that's why he's not seeing the field? Or is there something more sinister involved with Matt Nagy and how he deploys his players? I don't know. It really is frustrating, and this guy is needed more than ever. Hey, I want you to answer this question from Jimmy. Christ, who is better wide receiver, Robinson or Galladay? That's a good question.
Okay, so it's actually very funny that Jimmy asks this question. We all have a group chat with our buddies where we talk sports and, just ramble on. I got into a legit, somewhat argument with a good friend of mine who I love dearly, but he's an idiot. He tried to tell me that Galladay is better than Robinson. I didn't mean to make you choke on your brown liquor there.
My whiskey.
Hear me out. I want to make this very, very clear. My favorite receiver in the NFL is Kenny Galladay. I'm not an NIU grad, but I've had season tickets since I'm 16. So I've been just a huge fan of the black and red my whole life. I go to every home game. We tailgate. I love Kenny Galladay. He is my favorite receiver in the NFL. Allen Robinson's better. You look at every one of his career years, and all the numbers are better. He has better yardage per reception. He gets less targets because he's on a worse team. His three quarterbacks he's ever caught a pass from are Blake Bortles, Mitchell Trubisky, and Nick Foles. And now he's got Andy Dalton on the horizon. And Kenny Galladay's been taking passes from Matthew Stafford, who, despite the winning in Detroit, Matthew Stafford, you can argue he's a Hall of Famer. He's kind of in that Phil Rivers kind of area where he just yards, 4,000-yard season, 5,000-yard season. Not too much playoff success because the team's dog crap around him. But, if he goes to the Rams and wins a Super Bowl or two, then people are going to be like, well, of course he's a Hall of Famer. But I think he is now. And he kind of came in right when they were moving on from Megatron. I think it was like a year or two later. They started calling this guy Babytron. If you got the Detroit faithful, who, despite them being mean to us on Twitter about their stupid, useless team, that's a good football town. I've been there a bunch. I've been there for MAC title games. You know, I love Detroit as a sports town. They're a gritty, kind of in-your-face, mean Midwest sports town.
I agree.
For them to engulf Kenny Galladay like that and call him Babytron after one of the greatest players to ever play for them in Calvin Johnson, I don't know. Matthew Stafford was throwing him the ball. We'll see how he does with Daniel Jones. They're very similar. They're the big man, deep threat. You throw the ball, and they're going to make the 50-50 play more often than not, can catch balls in the end zone, you know, beat their defensive back that they're facing on routes. But I'm taking Robinson career up to this point. And some people think, well, Robinson's older. They're actually the same age. So it seems like Robinson's been around a little longer. But
yeah, that was one of the knocks on Galladay when he was coming out in the draft. It was his age, you know, and that he's going to have a shorter career than some. But I feel the thing about A-Rob is that he makes these sensational catches. Now, I know there were some end zone catches that he probably should have had, but man, he really bailed out the Bears quarterbacks, both Foles and Trubisky, over and over again. For that reason, and the fact that Galladay missed several games with injury, and not that he has a history of being injury prone, because if I recall correctly, and I look back at his stats, last year 2020 season was the only time that he missed any significant time. So it's not like he's injury prone, but you know, you kind of hate to see a guy have, what was it that he had last year? Was it a lingering hamstring that just kept?
Yeah. And did he like deal with it more than once? He like had it, came back, then he was out again for a little bit.
Right. It's just a lingering thing. I agree with Tony here is that the Bears need a speedy wide receiver. Darnell Mooney is certainly, you know, one of the fastest guys around, maybe faster than any NFC North wide receiver that I can think of. But it certainly doesn't help to have another one. And there's plenty of those guys in this draft. This is a really good crop of wide receivers, and so hopefully Ryan Pace can hit on that again. Let's move over. You know, I think. Well, let's talk about the running back position quickly here. The acquisition of Damian Williams from the Kansas City Chiefs is just a great addition. That is a great addition by Ryan Pace to have David Montgomery and Damian Williams as your running backs going into the 2021 season, and having Tariq Cohen as your gadget back, your slot wide receiver, and so forth. I think that's really going to help this offense. You agree?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I want anyone who comes from Kansas City's offense. It sounds pathetic to say, but my issue is they call him Playoff Damian. We're not going to the playoffs. So it's almost like not why, and maybe they'll surprise us all and look awesome, but it's definitely a nice running back room, because I don't know if you're a fantasy football guy. I'm taking Monty in the second round if he's available. I think he could have a 1,000-yard season. And with Tariq Cohen coming back, that's a nice looking running back room with those three. Like you said, you got the one guy who's north-south, just run the damn ball, I like to say, for the Bears. And then you got Tariq Cohen, who could go east-west, catch the ball, do all sorts of weird plays that Matt Nagy likes to come up with when he's drinking his wine on Friday night. And then you got Playoff Damian, who's just going to come in and kind of solidify. And then, of course, if someone gets hurt, having three guys is having better than two. Absolutely. Because then you go from 3 to 2 to 2 to 1. Like, you know, guys get hurt in football seasons. It's very rare to play 16 games, especially when you're a running back. And yeah, I'm a fan of the signing for sure. It's definitely going to be one of the focal points, I think, of the offense, especially with Andy Dalton being brought in.
Right. And I would love to see David Montgomery average 20 touches a game this upcoming, 15 rushes, 5 passes. I mean, he proved in his second season that he can catch the ball really well, much better than Jordan Howard. And that's not a knock on Jordan Howard, because Howard, I thought, was unfairly maligned because he missed a couple of key passes in the red zone, big time passes, but his hands weren't terrible. They were bad, but not terrible. But David Montgomery has proven that he can catch the ball and he can be that dual back. I would not at all be surprised if he got 1,800 all-purpose yards, and then Damian Williams adds another 800 all-purpose yards. That running back position, and then of course with Tariq, man, you're talking about a lot of yards those three guys can accumulate if they move the chains. The key thing about these running backs is you've got to move the chains, because Matt Nagy just gives up on his running backs much too quickly if they don't pick up first rounds, if they don't get positive yards, if there's a running play of minus yards, Matt all of a sudden starts to slump his shoulders and he starts to warm up his arm and he starts calling pass plays. And that's another story. Is he going to continue to is he going to return to calling plays? A lot of people thought he was calling plays after Bill Lazor had some success, and then the Bears offense started to stink towards that last game or two. So that's a whole nother story. But I want to turn our attention over to the defense in those last few minutes that we have. Your overall thoughts about the defense. When we talk defense, it always starts with Khalil Mack. Do you think Khalil Mack still has some prime time football left in him?
Yeah, Khalil Mack, in my opinion, he's not outside of that first year. I can't say he's lived up to being the highest paid defensive player of all time and the biggest contract ever handed out by the Chicago Bears in history. But I still believe he's not necessarily in a position to succeed because that defense is on the field way too much.
Great point.
And it's hard. And I don't like the double team argument. He's double teamed on every play and held on every play. So is Aaron Donald.
Mm-hmm.
So let's not act like that's an excuse. Every premier pass rusher in the NFL is held often, is double teamed often. That's no excuse in my opinion. But I do believe, I thought Robert Quinn was going to help Mack a lot, being on the opposite side. Really, Akeem Hicks is the premier. I hate calling him Robin to Khalil's Batman because Akeem Hicks is so awesome when he's healthy, but definitely need more from Mack. The turnover thing in 2018 was so key.
It really was.
And people don't even really talk about it that much. They go back to like Mitch having a semi-Pro Bowl season and the running backs, and they just talk about the defense as a whole. Nobody ever really brings up how the turnover rate was unrealistically high. And a lot of that had to do with Khalil Mack being one of the three best players in the NFL. And people wonder why Eddie Jackson looked kind of average last year. Kyle Fuller wasn't. I mean, Kyle Fuller has steel hands, but he could break up a pass as good as any DB in the NFL. And he's going to go thrive in Denver. That's my bold prediction going into the season, is that Fuller is going to be back to 2018 Fuller with his friend Vic Fangio again.
Yep.
But that a lot of that success was created because of pressure. That's the most important thing on defense, in my opinion. I don't know if you align with me on that, but the pass rush is just so key. And as they're not getting any younger. What were they, the second oldest defense in the NFL last season? So I saw the comment about Eddie Goldman. I couldn't agree more. That's a huge loss. Roquan Smith is probably going to evolve into being one of the keys on defense if they don't trade him for Russell Wilson.
Right.
But, Roquan Smith is one of Ryan Pace's glaring successes, especially in the early rounds. So, to me, he's the key on defense. Khalil Mack is Khalil Mack. He's going to get anywhere from 8 to 10 sacks a season. He'll create pressure, but it can't be all on him. And getting rid of Fuller was, especially because that was to pay for Andy Dalton, it really hurts things. And if they're letting Akeem Hicks seek out his own trade, that'll be a tough loss, even though they're kind of used to playing without him due to injury over the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I used to be higher on the defense. I still think they're a good defense. I'd like to see what they would have looked like in 2019 and 2020 if the offense was capable of not going 3 and out 4 times in a row.
Right. Yeah, to your point about, I agree with you, pressure creates turnovers in the backfield. You disrupt a quarterback. Sometimes you don't even need sacks, although sacks are great because there's a loss of yardage, and you also scare the shit out of quarterbacks. Jared Goff, the Rams game in 2018, a perfect example. He just got rattled and was making terrible throws. But also it works vice versa, right? So if you've got a great defensive backfield and a great scheme, which Vic Fangio had and Chuck Pagano didn't, Fangio became a master. He was always a master at disguising coverages, but prior to that season, he was excited that he had a group of defensive backs who knew how to run his defense. They knew how to disguise coverages. They had good communication. It was just running well. Adrian Amos and Eddie Jackson were Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. These guys were thieves. And while Amos didn't get a lot of interceptions, his play allowed Eddie Jackson to roam the field and allowed him to almost in some cases kind of ad-lib and improvise and pick up those interceptions. And Prince of Mukamara did not have a great season, but he was smart enough to run this Fangio defense. And when I say didn't have a great season, he just didn't have the athletic skills that he once had. And then, of course, Fuller was in his prime. So those four defensive backs, they just knew how to run Vic Fangio. And then you bring in Chuck Pagano. I don't know why. He only coached 1 year as a defensive coordinator with the Ravens. He had a tremendous roster, but he did not know any of these new schemes that guys like Fangio have innovated in the NFL. And so that's why he was forced out. He didn't retire. He was forced out. He was told, listen, if, we're going to fire you. So what do you want to do? You want to retire? And so he says, okay, I'll retire. But that's the key, is to get, hopefully the new defensive coordinator, Sean Desai, is going to employ some of these things that he learned under the tutelage of Vic Fangio, that they'll have some of these defensive secondary schemes, just like Brandon Staley did with the Rams. I mean, there's a big reason why, now he had the players, of course, he had tremendous talent, but he also employed a lot of those Fangio schemes, which is why the Rams had a sensational defense. I think the Bears could potentially get back to close to that 2018 level, but a lot depends, of course, on the performance of these aging stars, guys like Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn, guys who, you can have a great scheme, but do they still have it? Do they still have the athletic talent to beat the double team, to do some of the things? Sean Desai is not going to stop dropping Robert Quinn back into coverage. It's just not going to happen. That's part of what this defense is. But the key thing is, can they minimize that? And then when he is rushing the quarterback, can he get there and at the very least disrupt the play and hopefully get some big time sacks? So that's how I see this defense. And first and foremost, if this team is going to return to the playoffs in 2022 or again, make the playoffs again for the third time in Matt Nagy's 4 seasons, it's going to be first and foremost because of the defense. Because I don't see Andy Dalton bringing a high-powered – I don't see the Bears offense scoring 30 points with Andy Dalton as the quarterback. I just don't see it. He's good for a couple of touchdowns a game. He'll protect the ball. 2 touchdowns and 1 interception is probably what he's going to average if he plays all 17 games, which is not bad. It's in the tradition of the very best Chicago Bears quarterbacks in their history, but it's certainly not Aaron Rodgers type numbers.
No, certainly not. It's just, I want to believe all that. I want to believe if they're on the field too much, the fatigue starts to set in. They're going to be awesome at keeping the other team from scoring, but the turnover rate would help the offense. I hope you're right. Sean Desai, he seems to – I want to drink on a Monday too when I'm thinking of these Bears. I like that comment.
Jerome Munoz says that.
Yeah, that's an awesome comment. Wow, it's true. But yeah, if they can get back to anything close to the 2018 season, then maybe they'll have a little bit of success. But it could also put the quarterback in position to succeed. But I think it's a little bit of, one hand washing the other. Can the quarterback put the defense in position to succeed? We'll see.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's finish up with a little bit of talk about baseball and then hockey. I know you're a baseball fan. What are your thoughts of the 2021 Chicago baseball season? Do you expect both teams to make it in the playoffs? And if not, which team? I know at least one of those two teams is going to make a playoff appearance. What are your thoughts on the prospects of these two Chicago baseball teams?
Yeah, I'll open with the Cubs. I believe the Cubs have a chance to come in second place in their division. I like the Cardinals roster. They added Nolan Arenado, and they're just always one of those teams that just kind of like how the Yankees are. They're just always kind of there, pinching at you like, hey, man, we still exist. We're still one of the premier franchises in all of baseball. But the Cubs still have Anthony Rizzo, Javier Baez, Chris Bryant, Wilson Contreras. Kyle Hendricks, in my opinion, is one of the best pitchers in the world. Nobody talks about it. I think the Cubs can absolutely win the division. If they come in second to the Cardinals, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm not sleeping on the Brew Crew either. I think the Reds are going to take a little bit of a step back. Got some weird things going on there. Losing Trevor Bauer, just didn't really live up last year like I thought they would. Kind of one of the more disappointing teams, even though they made the extended playoffs. It was just kind of a disappointing season from the Reds to me. I thought they'd be the clear division winners and challenge the Dodgers, but it just never came to fruition there. The thing that intrigues me about the Cubs, there's more off the field storylines than on the field storylines right now. It all came out today. David Kaplan started it on his radio show this morning, and then all the tweets with the quotes confirming everything with Anthony Rizzo and his contract. Listen, I'm a diehard White Sox fan, but I'm not oblivious to what's around me with the Cubs.
Sure.
Anthony Rizzo is he's the most consistent baseball player that the city of Chicago has seen since those early 2000 White Sox and Cubs teams when there was Frank Thomas, Paul Konerko, Jermaine Dye, even A.J. Pierzynski, Mark Burley to bring up pitchers. So I definitely think Anthony Rizzo is getting slighted. Someone said a stat I saw on Twitter earlier today that, I don't remember if it was WAR or one of those advanced statistics saying that Mike Trout was the only more consistent player than Anthony Rizzo since the year 2014. Oh. And Mike Trout is one of the, best players of all time. So Anthony Rizzo, he's a statue guy. He's a number retired guy for me. I'm not necessarily sure he's a Hall of Famer. I'm a hard guy to get a Hall of Fame vote from. But I definitely think they're lowballing Rizzo, as that comment said. And Chris Bryant, I don't know what to make of him. Him and Javier Baez were both awesome in 2019. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to take too much stock in the guys who played bad. I'll give guys credit for playing good in 2020. Right. Like Jose Abreu finally having talent around him, and he wins the MVP. I'm not taking that away from him just because it was the short season, but I will give guys a little bit of slack if they've kind of had a soft season. Christian Yelich in Milwaukee, tough season. JD Martinez in Boston, tough season. It's, for me, the Cubs, if those three guys bounce back, I get a Last Dance vibe. We all watched that in the heart of the pandemic on ESPN, the documentary about the Last Dance. That's kind of where the Cubs are headed. It seems like they're in this last hoorah season. Bryant, Rizzo, and Baez are all going to test free agency. If they don't bring back two of those guys, it's a rebuild. Yeah. They sent down and they sent down Nico Horner.
Mm-hmm.
So he can get his service time. I mean, that screams rebuild to me.
Yep.
If you were all in on winning in 2020,
exactly,
winning those games in April, they might not feel as important as the ones in September. But let me tell you something. When you're trailing by half a game in September, it's like, well, what would have happened if we started the season with Nico Horner? In 2015, the Cubs held Bryant back because they were just kind of like opening that window at the time. Mm-hmm. And then, he came in and hit the ground running. It feels different here with Horner. They're not built to let a guy like Horner start in the minors. Yeah. He's MLB ready, in my opinion. I watch a lot of Cubs spring training. Mm-hmm. He can't be – he's one of their best 26 is the best way to put it. And the fact that they sent him down and they have Baez, Rizzo, and Bryant potentially gone. Wilson Contreras only has the 2 years left. They let John Lester walk. They traded Yu Darvish. And they let Kyle Schwarber go.
Right.
And then they replaced him with Jock Peterson, who is a slightly thinner version of Kyle Schwarber. If you look at their numbers, if you look at how their platoon guys, they can block the righty or stink against the lefty or vice versa. That's exactly what Jock Peterson is. And, to transition real quick to the White Sox, I don't know how much time we have left.
Take it as much as you want.
There's no reason they can't win the American League. And I'm not saying that as a biased guy. You can go down my Twitter feed. I've been very happy with what they've done since 2016, but before that, you couldn't have found a more pessimistic guy. Like they were dog crap until they traded Chris Sale to Boston for Moncada and Kopech. But it's weird to feel this way about the White Sox, and people are probably going to assume it's just someone being biased, but I truly haven't felt this way about this team ever. Maybe going into 06 when they were the defending champions, but I was 12 years old. In 2005, nobody thought they'd be a World Series champion. They kind of went in with a bunch of maybes, and like maybe they could win the division. They came up just short in 2004. So like maybe adding Jermaine Dye can, make them a contender. But I see that comment about trying to sign Jock Peterson. Jock Peterson would look a lot different on the White Sox than he does the Cubs, because he'd be playing right field in this platoon with Adam Eaton before the Eloy injury. Now he might be the full-time left fielder, but the talent around him, he's going to probably by the end of the year, he'll be batting 6th or 7th with the Cubs. That's a lot different than batting 6th or 7th on the White Sox right now. If you have a guy like Luis Robert coming up after you, it's a little bit different than having a guy like Jason Hayward coming up after you. And the pitching is better on the White Sox. Kyle Hendricks would be their number 2 behind Giolito. But other than that, you would take every starter on the White Sox over every starter on the Cubs besides Kyle Hendricks. And they're going to compete for the best bullpen in the league. Everyone talks about Liam Hendricks, best closer in baseball. Aaron Bummer is the best pitcher on that bullpen. He's awesome. And he kind of reminds me of Chris Sale. He's kind of mean. He looks at you funny. And he just intimidates people. I think the White Sox, if you look at every roster in the American League, even without Eloy, and I love Eloy. He's my favorite player to watch. And where he came from kind of makes it a little more sweet. But there's no doubt in my mind that this team, even without Eloy, because they're going to get Moncada back to where he was, that'll basically replace Eloy. And then they'll get him back before the playoffs. And even the Yankees, their rotation is Garrett Cole and then a bunch of question marks.
Right.
And then you look at the AL West, the Astros, when they don't cheat, they're not as good. The Angels have Trout and Rendon, and they could be good, I guess. And the A's lost a bunch of pieces. So outside of and then there's the Twins. The biggest issue is in the division. But those two teams will be 1 and 2. And then there's the Yankees are the Yankees. They're kind of like the Cardinals. They figure it out. But there's no reason the White Sox can't win the AL pennant. Can they beat the Dodgers or the Padres in a 7-game series? That's a topic for if we get to that point. I'm not going to divulge into that right now. But that's a topic.
We had prior to this show tonight on the Barroom Network, we had South Burbs Hitmen, and they had a lot of interesting things to talk about the White Sox. One of the questions that came up in the chat room is, how many victories do you think Tony La Russa, as the manager, is he going to add to this team over last year's manager? And then I countered with, and how many losses are the Sox going to suffer because Eloy Jimenez is not in the lineup? So I'll ask you both of those questions. How many wins does Tony La Russa and his managerial expertise bring to the Chicago White Sox? And then how many losses do you think could the White Sox suffer as a result of not having Eloy in the lineup?
I literally think they cancel each other out, which definitely makes the Sox a worse team because they were going to have both, which would have been awesome. But I think La Russa adds 5 wins. And let me be very, very clear. He was not my manager of choice. I wanted them to get Alex Cora really bad. I'm a big Alex Cora guy. I kind of cheer for the Boston teams on the side in every sport. But I definitely wanted Alex Cora, and he considered it. I listened to all the Boston podcasts where he was guests on. It was the Red Sox and the White Sox for him. His family was intrigued by Chicago. He's very into the Latino community, which the White Sox, one of the best in the league at dealing with that.
Right.
And it was an intriguing option. They ended up with La Russa. It is what it is. It's an upgrade over Rick Renteria. And the question is, how much does he add over Rick Renteria? They probably win that game 3 against the Oakland A's if Tony La Russa is their manager, because they for sure would have managed the bullpen differently. They took Garrett Crochet out because of injury, but they let Matt Foster stay in way too long. Now, let me be very clear. Matt Foster is a very good bullpen arm. A lot of people don't know his name. Google his stats right now if you're in the chat rooms. Matt Foster was nails for the White Sox in the regular season last year. And because their starting pitching depth wasn't what it is this year by adding Lance Lynn and being a little more confident in Dylan Cease this year, Matt Foster was an opener in a bullpen game last year, and he was awesome every single time. But they left him in too long in the playoff game. I think La Russa would have managed it a little better. And there were many games in the regular season last year where Rick Renteria would make a decision with the pitching, and you'd just be like, I don't know about that. And then it would not work out. And this year's bullpen is so much more enhanced by having Liam Hendricks on the back end. So La Russa, you figure in a 162-game season by simple bullpen management alone. But there's also the starting lineup. Nicky Delmonico was batting 4th for the White Sox in early August last season. People forget that. This is a playoff team. One of the best teams in the American League last season had Nicky Delmonico and his 163 batting average batting 4th. Tony La Russa would not let that happen. Grandal would have hit 4th, or Jimenez would have hit 4th. He would have even bumped up Robert to 4th before something like that would have ever happened. So I don't see, those kinds of things happening with La Russa. We could talk about Eloy. I think that's losing 5 games right there. So it evens out totally. Eloy can hit 50. I truly believe he can win a home run title. It's not, who is in that conversation in the American League? Trout, JD Martinez. There are some awesome bats. Nelson Cruz is real good every year. Luke Voigt in New York. Yeah. DJ LeMahieu's a real good hitter. Eloy is awesome. And he's a bonehead in the outfield. This is the rated R version of the show at 12:14 a.m. Eloy Jimenez is an asshole for doing that. Like, you can't be doing that in a regular season game or in a spring training game. And I would say it right to his face. I would say, I love everything about you except the fact that you're an asshole. If those guys on your White Sox show want to have me on to interview Jimenez ever, I'll say it right to his face. You're an asshole for doing that. You knew it. You bump into Luis Robert every other day when he's trying. Like, he's so much better at catching baseballs than you. Let him make the catch.
Exactly.
But
just DH.
And I hate that. I hate making a 25-year-old DH. Yeah. I'm a mindset guy. I believe every sport is mental. Mm-hmm. If you have to have a proper mindset to be a DH. David Ortiz, Frank Thomas, Nelson Cruz, Edgar Martinez. These guys were DHs to the core. And I'm not sure Jimenez is that. He loves playing baseball too much. So will his offensive numbers suffer if he steps down to DH? They got to try it. Like, I'm done with – I still believe in that philosophy, but when it comes to Jimenez, I'm done with it. They have to try. And if his offensive numbers suffer, then you throw him back in left field and say you put a choke – or not a choke collar. What's the one with the zaps? It's like if you leave a certain radius, you get zapped. Yeah. This guy needs to stop. And I hate saying this about him because I love him so much. That's the next White Sox jersey I'm buying. And, I love everything about his game. When he yells, "Hi, Mom," into the camera with his big smile, it's so fun, vibrant. I love everything about the guy, but he needs to stop doing that. So, like I said about his offense, 300 hitter with 50 home runs, you're taking away 5 losses at minimum by taking him out of the lineup and replacing him with like Jake Lamb or Leury Garcia or something like that. So,
Steven loves what you're saying, but he's saying it's difficult to take you seriously while you're wearing a Miami hat.
I can explain the Miami hat real quick if you'd like.
Please.
I'm such an asshole. Like, I can cover the Cubs. I can cover the Cubs with a straight face and be completely unbiased if you like. If you want to talk Cubs, I could talk Cubs. I know everyone on that team, and I know who's good and I know who stinks. I bought this the day it came out that they were playing the Marlins in the playoffs.
Oh, look at that.
Like, that's the explanation for that. I'm just a troll. I want my family to laugh at me and think I'm an idiot. I'm very good at it. And that's the story behind the Miami Marlins hat. And it's the only hat I have with me right now. So that's why I made an appearance on the show.
Well, speaking of family, you are going to be co-hosting Bar Down Blackhawk Talk here on the network with your brother. Tell us a little bit about your brother. He's not here to defend himself, so go ahead and say whatever you want about him.
Joey's a complete asshole. When he's talking, you should mute the mic. And then when I start talking, no. Joey and I are both, we have played baseball since we're 5 years old. Hockey came into our life a little later, and we went from zero knowledge of it to way too much absolute useless knowledge of it in 5 minutes. And he's here.
He's got a Bruin logo too with a Blackhawk feathers attached.
Yeah, and that's another thing about me and Joey. We're gonna bring you the most unbiased Blackhawks content. I'm a Chicago fan in every sport except hockey. And as weird as that sounds, I'm about to host the show. That's why I love it. That's why I love doing the Blackhawks, because it's my hometown team. I'm a fan of them, but Joey's a Bruins fan and I'm a Devils fan. And we believe that is going to create sweet love to create the perfect, unbiased Blackhawks coverage. And we're going to bring NHL content. You know, our entire third of our pilot episode is going to be discussing the NHL as a whole and, you know, keeping you up to speed. On most weeks, that's going to be the case where we discuss the NHL as a whole. And I just think what we bring to the table in terms of hockey is very passionate, very analytical, great analysis on what's real. There's so many storylines on and off the ice surrounding the Blackhawks this season. I just think this podcast is going to be awesome. And if you enjoy sports, if you enjoy great banter, everything you saw from me in this show tonight, I'm going to be that passionate about it times 1,000 once Wednesday comes around. And it's going to be good stuff. And me and Joey can really go at it. And we can also, I think we have great chemistry even when we're agreeing on stuff, which will probably happen more often than not because we both have a good grasp of the game. I always say Joey is 10 times smarter than me with a little bit less charisma. And we're going to try and bring that out of him once this show begins. I can't wait till the day he looks at me and says, "You're a freaking idiot." I just can't wait for that kind of stuff. We're going to get it out of him. And I think the chemistry's there. It's real. And nothing that you guys are going to see is going to be like predetermined or unnatural. Everything that happens is real. And you're going to get authentic, raw hockey coverage. And that's what we love to do. You know, when we show up to family parties and stuff, people are like, "Hey, what's going on with this?" And, you know, there'll be me and Joey to have to answer. Like, you know, sometimes we want to just enjoy the meal and not talk about it at all times, but still, like, you know, that's what we do. It's just what we love. So I can't wait. It's going to be awesome.
I can't wait either. It's Wednesday at 2:00 Central. Bar Down, Blackhawk Hockey. It's going to talk Blackhawk Talk. It's going to be such a fascinating show. Again, it's a lot of NHL talk, but definitely a lot of Blackhawks talk from two guys who are very objective because they've got no skin in the game. They're going to tell you, you know, and we've had a lot of shows here where some of the opinions by co-hosts, whether it's the Bears or whatever team, has all been clouded by the fact that we're fans, you know. And I know when I talk about the Bears, I sometimes make excuses for them, and then I also get angry when people diss my Bears. You know, I'm the only one that can diss them.
Yeah, I could talk shit about them, but you dare, you Packer fan. Exactly. I mean, you saw it with me with the Bears when we were talking 20 minutes ago. I was getting legitimately angry. That probably won't happen with the Blackhawks. Like, I love the Bears, and I love the Hawks too. Don't get me wrong. I cheer when they score, and I get pissed when they give up a goal. But it's going to be really good. I think people are going to enjoy it a lot.
I can't wait. The gloves drop Wednesday at 2:00 right here, live on the Barroom Network's YouTube channel. And if you can't catch the show live and interact with us, then make sure you just catch it on demand. It will be on audio podcasts and also on all of our video outlets. James Foster says Bears are like fucking family. Yes.
I wish they weren't run like a family.
Well, that's
part of the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and Vinny is going to join us here on some of our Bears coverage pre and post draft. We'll get his thoughts on things. So this is not the last that you've heard of him talking Chicago Bears, and we'd love to get Joey on board too, because I know he's a fan of Chicago Bears football or the NFL football, and so we'll definitely get him on board here. But great job on your debut here at the Barroom Network. Again, for folks listening on audio, let people know where they can catch you on social media and where they can find your sports writing work.
So it's at Vinny Parisi, Vinnie, no Y. And you can find in my bio on at Vinny Parisi is the Twitter handles for at Sox Showdown and at DeWindy City FS, which stands for Fansided, which are the accounts that, I run and help run with all the articles from fansided.com. It's a great website. I encourage everyone to read the site, read our stuff. There's great Bears, White Sox, Blackhawks, Cubs, Bulls, all of it. Anything, opinion and analysis, just great fun to be had, great content. And I love it when people give me feedback too. So my DMs are always open. Send me messages. I'm not great at responding to @ messages very good. Well, but the DMs are open and I respond to those. So definitely want to hear from everyone on there. Follow me. It'll be a good time. We're going to grow this show and make it awesome.
Outstanding. And then a programming note, we got a busy week here at the Barroom. We've got a special Pass the Mic episode. For those of you not familiar, Alyssa Barbieri and John Buffone talk to women in the sports media business. Their guest this week is Allie Reddick. She is the founder of Athlete Relations. That's a company that works with professional athletes. One of their clients is Jordan Howard, who we talked about earlier. And basically, they do everything for that athlete in terms of getting them interviews, in terms of giving them advice and so forth. So it's going to be interesting talking to Allie about what she does for a living, but also about what are some of the obstacles she's had to overcome as a woman to get into that line of work. There's a special episode of Buffone 55. Robert Schmitz of Windy City Gridiron is going to be on. And we've got another guest on there who's going to talk about the cap. And I'm sorry, I don't recall the name, but that's going to be a really interesting show. There's a late start to that because we're actually editing together 2 different parts of that, but we are going to run the show live, and some of us involved in the show will be available live to interact in the chat. The Mike North Advantage every Wednesday, 9:30. Mike is the raging mouth of Chicago sports talk. He's got sports betting tips. He's been on quite a roll. We're winning some money for people. And then a very special announcement. We've got another new Chicago Bulls show. Those of you who have seen Bulls 101 Saturdays at 11 p.m. Central know that that's a great show with Laro and Chris Amundsen, looking at the Chicago basketball from a very academic, coaching, strategic style. Well, this new show that's airing is a perfect complement. It's called C-Red Radio. A lot of people who are familiar with the Barroom know of Tyler Ellis, Gaines Report. He co-hosts a show with me and John Buffone on football called Bear Football during the season. Well, he and his brothers, Jordan Ellis and Joshua Ellis, are going to be talking Bears football, but they're also going to be providing sports betting tips because Jordan Ellis has made quite a nice career for himself with sports betting. So he's going to share some of that knowledge. And they're also going to give spiritual advice, financial advice, wellness advice. So it's going to be 75% talking Chicago Bulls, from a fan and coaching perspective, but also a lot of other material on that show. And that show premieres Thursday at 7:00. Draft on Tap, which is usually on Thursdays at 8 p.m., is going to return in a week. The guys are busy looking at tape and getting ready for our next topic of discussion, which is going to be Who are we talking about? We're talking about inside linebackers and then cornerbacks. We know we need to pick up a cornerback in the draft. That's Draft on Tap. It's usually on every Thursday at 8 o'clock. And we're also planning some sensational material for football fans of the draft, as the draft is getting pretty close. Let's see what our friends over at Tankathon say. It's 30 days, 18 hours, 33 minutes, and 51 seconds, 49 seconds, 48 seconds until the NFL draft. We can't wait, and hopefully the Bears are going to do something incredible and bring up our optimism for the season, because right now it sucks. But most important thing that I want to leave you with is that Vinny's show premieres Wednesday at 2 o'clock Central. He and his brother are going to drop the gloves and talk Blackhawk hockey. Hey, Vinny, any shout outs? You want to say hi to mom or anyone special, any of your friends that are watching?
Absolutely. You know, my mom and dad, number one supporters for me and my brother, you know, gave us everything we ever wanted and needed in life. So we wouldn't be here without them. My girlfriend, Hannah, I love you. And extra shout out to my best friend, Dylan. Encouraged me to get to where I am right now. So those 5 are the main ones, and I love you all.
All right, brother. Thanks a lot. We'll see you on Wednesday afternoon. And thanks very much for watching, all of you in the chat room. Those of you watching on demand, thanks very much. Dan Aguirre will be back next week. Actually, we weren't going to do a show next week, but then, and Dan doesn't even know this, we are going to do a show next week. I thought I was getting my second vaccine shot next Monday, but my wife informed me today, no, it's the following week. And so I was a little bit reluctant to do a show on the day I get my second vaccine, because I've heard that a lot of people have, 24 hours of fever and stuff. So I thought I'd play it safe. So I'm going to call Dan after this and say, hey, we're back on next week. And so hopefully he'll be free of any obligations and be able to do this show. So with that, we're going to let you go. Thanks again for watching. And remember to follow us at Bears Barroom for all of our information of what's coming up and so forth. Take care, everybody.